They sent her to him like a curse wrapped in calico, the widowed woman no one wanted, a punishment disguised as a bargain. Caleb Monroe stood in the dust, watching the wagon approach, knowing 20 acres had cost him more than land ever should. The family called it a trade. He called it a trap. But when Iris Dalton stepped down with eyes that had already buried one man and survived his brother's schemes, Caleb realized the truth. She wasn't the punishment. She was the secret they were desperate to hide. And somewhere between silence and survival, she would become the treasure he never knew he'd been searching for. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. The Montana sky stretched wide and indifferent over Caleb Monroe's ranch, the kind of endless blue that made a man feel both free and insignificant all at once. He stood at the edge of his property line, one boot resting on the lower rail of a fence he'd mended 3 times that summer, and watched the dust rise on the eastern road. The wagon was coming, right on time, right on schedule, like a debt being called in. Caleb was 34 years old, weathered by sun and silence, and he'd spent the better part of the last decade building something out of nothing. 200 acres of grazing land, a modest herd, a house that didn't leak when it rained. These were the sum total of his ambitions, and they'd been enough. He'd never asked for more, never wanted complications, but land had a way of making men do things they'd otherwise refuse. 20 acres. That's what the Harlan family had offered. Prime grazing land that bordered his northern property, a stretch of grassland with a natural spring that would double the value of his herd come summer. They'd approached him 6 weeks ago, all smiles and handshakes, talking about neighborly agreements and mutual benefit. The eldest Harlan brother, Joseph, had done most of the talking. A broad-shouldered man with a politician's grin and a card-sharp's eyes. "We've got land you need," Joseph had said, leaning back in Caleb's kitchen chair like he owned it. "And we've got a situation that needs resolving." Caleb had learned long ago that when a man called something a situation, it usually meant trouble wearing a pleasant mask. "What kind of situation?" he'd asked. "Our brother's widow, Iris." Joseph had said the name like it tasted bitter. "Been living with the family since Thomas passed. It's been difficult. She needs a fresh start, a place of her own. We thought, seeing as you're out here alone running this whole operation by yourself," the implication had hung in the air like smoke. "You want me to take in your dead brother's wife," Caleb had said flatly, "in exchange for land." "We want to help her find independence," Joseph had corrected, that smile never wavering. "And help you expand your holdings. Everyone benefits." Caleb had wanted to throw them out, should have thrown them out. But 20 acres with a spring, that was the difference between scraping by and actually prospering. That was security. That was the future he'd been working towards since he'd first broken ground on this place. So he'd said yes. God help him, he'd said yes. Now the wagon was close enough that he could make out details. A single horse, sway-backed and tired. A driver he didn't recognize, probably hired from town. And a figure in the back, sitting perfectly still among what looked like a single bag and a wooden crate. Caleb pulled his hat down lower and started walking toward the house. He'd prepared a room, the small one off the kitchen that he'd been using for storage. Cleared it out, put in a bed frame he'd bought used from the widow Patterson, added a clean mattress and simple linens. It was sparse but functional. He wasn't running a charity house, and this wasn't a courtship. This was a business arrangement, pure and simple. She'd have her space. He'd have his. They'd share the land and nothing else. The wagon pulled up to the front of the house just as Caleb reached the porch. The driver, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, nodded once but didn't speak. He set the brake and climbed down, moving around to help his passenger. Caleb watched as a woman's hand appeared, gripping the edge of the wagon bed. Then she stood, and for the first time he saw Iris Dalton clearly. She was not what he'd expected. Caleb had formed a picture in his mind over the past weeks. A worn-down woman, perhaps, broken by grief and grateful for rescue. Someone soft and pliable who would fade into the background of his life like wallpaper. Someone who would know her place and keep to it. The woman who stood in his wagon was none of those things. Iris Dalton was tall, nearly as tall as Caleb himself, with a frame that suggested strength rather than delicacy. She wore a plain dress of dark gray homespun, buttoned to her throat and dusted with road dirt. Her hair, a deep auburn shot through with threads of copper, was pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. High cheekbones, a jaw that looked like it could cut glass, and eyes, gray-green like storm water, that met his directly, unflinching, and utterly without warmth. She didn't look grateful. She didn't look broken. She looked furious. "Mrs. Dalton," Caleb said, removing his hat. Manners, even in strange circumstances. His mother had drilled that into him young. "Mr. Monroe." Her voice was low, controlled. She accepted the driver's hand and stepped down from the wagon with precise movements, like someone who'd learned not to make unnecessary gestures. "I assume the Harlans explained the arrangement." "They did." "Then we understand each other." The driver hauled down her bag, a single carpet bag, worn at the corners, and the wooden crate. Caleb moved to help, but Iris was already reaching for the bag herself. "I can manage," she said. "Didn't say you couldn't." Caleb grabbed the crate anyway. It was heavier than it looked. "Just showing you to your room." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe? Or suspicion? She nodded once and followed him toward the house. The driver called out. "Ma'am, the family said—" "Tell the family nothing," Iris interrupted, not turning around. "You've done your job. You can leave." Caleb glanced back in time to see the driver shrug and climb back onto his wagon. Within minutes, he was gone, leaving nothing but settling dust and the sound of Caleb's boots on the wooden porch. Inside, the house felt smaller with another person in it. Caleb had lived alone for so long that he'd forgotten what it was like to be aware of someone else's presence, someone else's breath in the same space. He led her through the front room, simple furniture, a stone fireplace, everything clean but plain, and into the kitchen. "This way," he said, opening the door to the small room he'd prepared. Iris stepped inside and stopped. She looked at the bed, the single window with its flour sack curtain, the empty shelf on the wall. Her expression didn't change, but Caleb saw her shoulders drop slightly, as if she'd been bracing for something worse. "It's not much," he said. "It's mine." She set the bag on the bed and turned to take the crate from him. Her fingers brushed his briefly, calloused, he noticed. Working hands. That's more than I've had in 2 years. The admission caught him off guard. Before he could respond, she was moving past him, back into the kitchen. She surveyed the space with the same assessing look she'd given him earlier, cataloging, measuring, planning. "Where do you keep your flour?" she asked. "Pantry, left of the stove, but you don't have to—" "I eat, Mr. Monroe. That means I'll earn my keep." She was already pulling out a large bowl, checking the flour supply. "The Harlans may have sent me here like unwanted furniture, but I won't be treated like it. I'll work. We'll be clear on that from the start." Caleb leaned against the doorframe and studied her. In the better light of the kitchen, he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the thin white scar that ran along her left forearm below her pushed-up sleeve. She moved with economy and purpose, someone who'd learned to make every action count. "How long were you married?" he asked. Her hand stilled for just a moment. 3 years. "The Harlan said he died last year." "That's correct." She resumed measuring flour, not looking at him. "Thomas fell from a hayloft, broke his neck. They found him the next morning." The words were delivered without inflection, like she was reading from a grocery list. Caleb waited, but she offered nothing more. No tears, no trembling voice, no widow's grief. Just facts, stark and simple. "I'm sorry," he said, because it seemed like the thing to say. "Are you?" Now she did look at him, those stormwater eyes direct and challenging. "You didn't know him. You don't know me. Sorry is just a word people use when they don't know what else to say." "Fair enough," Caleb straightened. "Then I'll be straight with you, Mrs. Dalton. I don't know what the Harlans told you about this arrangement, but here's the truth of it. I needed land. They had land to sell. You were part of the deal. I agreed because I'm a practical man and this is a practical situation. You'll have room and board here. You'll be safe. You'll be left alone. In return, I got 20 acres and a spring. That's the bargain." Iris set down the measuring cup and faced him fully. "And the Harlans told you I needed a fresh start? That they were helping me find independence? Something like that." "They lied." She wiped her hands on a kitchen towel that she'd somehow already located. "They wanted me gone. Out of their house. Out of their sight. Out of their lives." I reminded them of Thomas and Thomas's death. She stopped herself, jaw tightening. Thomas's death was inconvenient for them in ways they don't want examined, so they found a way to make me disappear without making it look like they'd simply thrown out their brother's widow. They get to look charitable. You get your land. I get sent away like furniture that doesn't match the curtains anymore. The bitterness in her voice was so sharp it could have drawn blood. Caleb felt something shift in his understanding of the situation. He thought he was the one being manipulated, paying with land rights for an unwanted burden. But standing here, watching this woman who'd been bartered away like livestock, he realized they'd both been played. "What did you mean," he asked carefully, "about his death being inconvenient?" Iris turned back to the flower. "Nothing that concerns you, Mr. Monroe. Ancient history, dead men's secrets." She pulled out a tin of lard. "Do you want biscuits with dinner, or just bread?" The dismissal was clear, but Caleb found himself unwilling to let it go. "If there's something I should know, if the Harlans are going to come back here looking for—" "They won't come back." Her voice was flat, certain. "They've solved their problem. They have no reason to return. You'll have your peace, Mr. Monroe. That's what you wanted, isn't it? Peace and land and silence?" She was right. That was exactly what he'd wanted. What he'd always wanted. So why did it suddenly feel insufficient? "I'll be outside," he said, "working the south fence. Dinner's usually around 6, but I'm flexible." "6 is fine." Caleb grabbed his hat and left her there in his kitchen, already working dough with strong, practiced hands. He stepped out into the afternoon heat and took a breath of air that suddenly felt too thin. He'd made a bargain. A simple, practical bargain. Land for lodging, resources for resources. It should have been straightforward, but as he walked toward the barn to get his tools, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that Joseph Harlan had smiled so wide because he'd known something Caleb didn't. That the situation needing resolution was bigger and darker than a simple inconvenient widow, and that Iris Dalton, standing in his kitchen with her angry eyes and her careful words, was either the victim of something terrible or the cause of it. He didn't know which possibility worried him more. The first 3 days passed in a silence so complete it felt like its own living thing. Caleb kept to his routines, up before dawn, checking the herd, mending fence, hauling water, the endless small tasks that kept a ranch from sliding into chaos. He ate breakfast before Iris woke and took dinner after the sun was fully down, finding his plate waiting for him on the stove, covered with a clean towel. They existed in the same space like ghosts haunting different rooms. On the morning of the 4th day, Caleb came in early. A fence post had snapped clean through, and he'd run out of replacement wood, to find Iris standing in the kitchen doorway, staring at something outside. "Problem?" he asked. She didn't startle. "That garden plot. Behind the house. Has anyone used it?" Caleb looked where she was pointing. There was indeed a square of land, maybe 20 by 20 feet, marked off by old stones. The previous owner had kept vegetables there, but Caleb had never bothered. He got what he needed from town when he made his monthly supply runs. "Not in years," he said. "Why?" "Because it's a waste." Iris turned to look at him. "Good soil, southern exposure, close to the kitchen. It should be growing something." "Feel free," Caleb said. "If you want a garden, garden. Makes no difference to me." Something in her expression shifted, not quite softening, but easing slightly. "I'll need seeds, tools, a spade, at minimum." "There's tools in the barn. 3rd stall. As for seeds," Caleb considered. "I'm going into town Friday. You can make a list." "I have money," she said quickly. "I'll pay you back." "Didn't ask you to." "I'm telling you I will." They stood there in the early morning light, locked in a battle of wills over something as simple as garden seeds. Finally, Caleb nodded. "Friday," he repeated, and left her standing there. But when Friday came and he rode into town, he found himself in the general store with Iris's list in his hand, buying twice as many seed packets as she'd requested. Tomatoes and beans, squash and carrots, herbs he couldn't even name. When the shopkeeper, old Samuel Frost, raised an eyebrow, Caleb just shrugged. "Starting a garden," he said. "Didn't know you had the interest, Caleb." "I don't, but—" He paused, surprised by what he was about to say. "Someone else does." Samuel's other eyebrow joined the first. "Someone else? You got a woman out there, Monroe?" I got a lodger, business arrangement. But Samuel was already grinning. A woman lodger, business arrangement. Right. Well, you tell this business arrangement that she'll want these too. He added packets of flower seeds, hollyhocks, and black-eyed Susans. No garden's complete without something pretty. Caleb almost protested, but something stopped him. He paid for the flowers too. When he got back to the ranch, evening was falling. He found Iris behind the house, wielding a spade like a weapon, turning over soil that hadn't been touched in half a decade. She'd been at it for hours, clearly. Her dress was dirty, sweat darkened the back of her neck, and her hair had come partially loose from its severe bun. She looked alive. Got your seeds, Caleb said, dismounting and pulling the packages from his saddlebag. And some extras. Thought you might... He stopped. Iris had turned around, and her face had gone completely white. What's wrong? He asked. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking past him, toward the road. Caleb turned and saw what had drained the color from her face. 2 riders, still distant but approaching fast. Even from here, Caleb could make out their shapes, large men riding with purpose. The Harlans, Iris whispered. They came back. Her hand gripped the spade so hard her knuckles went bone white. I thought you said they wouldn't come back, Caleb said quietly. I was wrong. Her voice was hollow. God help me. I was wrong. Caleb looked at the approaching riders, then at the woman beside him who suddenly looked like she was staring down a firing squad. Every instinct in his body told him this was the moment to step back, to remember that this was just a business arrangement, that her problems weren't his problems, that he'd gotten his land and that was the end of his obligation. But he'd never been good at listening to sense when stubbornness was an option. Get in the house, he said. Mr. Monroe, get in the house, Mrs. Dalton. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you to. They won't hurt you, she said quickly. They're not here for you. This is about me. You should get in the house. Caleb checked his hip, feeling the familiar weight of his revolver. He never wore it around the property, but he'd put it on for the trip to town and hadn't taken it off yet. Lucky that. Now. For a moment he thought she'd refuse. Her jaw set in that stubborn line he was beginning to recognize. But then she nodded once and moved toward the house, still carrying the spade like she might need it for something other than gardening. Caleb watched her go, then turned to face the approaching riders. He recognized them now, Joseph Harlan and his younger brother Marcus. Joseph still had that politician's smile. Marcus looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. They pulled up about 20 feet from where Caleb stood, close enough to talk, not so close he couldn't draw if needed. Monroe, Joseph said, tipping his hat. Didn't expect to find you here. Thought you'd be out with the herd. It's my land, Caleb said evenly. I'm generally on it somewhere. Fair point. Joseph's eyes drifted toward the house. We're here to see Iris, family matter. Emily. Won't take but a minute. Mrs. Dalton isn't receiving visitors. Joseph's smile never wavered, but something cold entered his eyes. Now, that's not really your decision to make, is it? She's our sister-in-law. We've got business to discuss with her. Any business you've got with her, you can discuss with me first. Marcus shifted in his saddle. Caleb, don't make this difficult. We just need to ask her some questions. 5 minutes, that's all. Questions about what? The brothers exchanged a glance. Joseph's smile finally slipped. About Thomas's death, he said quietly. There's been concerns raised, things that don't add up. We need her to come back to town, talk to the sheriff, clear some things up. Caleb felt his blood go cold. You're accusing her of something. We're not accusing anyone of anything, Joseph said smoothly. We're just trying to get to the truth. Thomas's death was ruled an accident, but recently some information's come to light that suggests maybe it should be looked at again. Iris was the last person to see him alive. She was there when he fell. It's reasonable to want to ask her about that, wouldn't you say? I'd say it's mighty convenient you're raising these questions now, 6 weeks after you traded her away like livestock. Joseph's expression hardened. Careful, Monroe. This doesn't concern you. This is family business, Harlan business. You've got no stake in this. I've got 20 acres says otherwise, Caleb replied. That's the deal we made. I take her in, you give me the land.
Well, I've upheld my end. She's here. She's safe. She's under my roof. That makes her my responsibility. So if you've got questions for Mrs. Dalton, you can go through proper channels. Get the sheriff, bring a warrant, do this legal and above board.
But you don't get to ride onto my property and harass a woman because you've suddenly got convenient concerns about your brother's death a year after the fact. Marcus's hand drifted toward his belt. Caleb's did the same, and both men froze. Now let's not do anything stupid, Joseph said, his voice tight. We're not looking for trouble, Monroe, but you're making this very difficult. Good. The three men stared at each other in the fading light. Caleb could feel his heart hammering, but he kept his expression neutral, his posture relaxed. The key to winning a standoff was looking like you'd already won it. Finally, Joseph pulled his reins, backing his horse up a step. We'll be back, he said. With the sheriff. Like you suggested, legal and above board. But you should know something, Monroe. You're harboring a woman who might be a murderer. That land you're so proud of, it might cost you more than you bargained for. Think about that. They turned their horses and rode back the way they'd come, disappearing into the dusk. Caleb stood there until they were out of sight, then walked slowly to the house. His hands were shaking, reaction, adrenaline leaving his system. He'd talked big, but if they'd pushed it, if Marcus had drawn... The door opened before he reached it. Iris stood there, pale but composed, still holding that damned spade. You shouldn't have done that, she said. Probably not. They'll come back, like he said, with the law. I know. And when they do, when the sheriff asks questions, I won't have good answers. Her voice cracked slightly. I can't give them what they want. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her. At the fear she was trying so hard to hide, at the shame and anger and desperate pride all warring in her expression, at the way she held herself like she was braced for a blow that never quite landed but never quite stopped coming either. Then maybe, he said slowly, you should tell me what really happened, before they come back. Before this gets any worse, tell me the truth, Mrs. Dalton. All of it. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she nodded once and stepped back, letting him into his own house, into whatever storm was coming, into the bargain he'd made that was turning into something far more complicated than 20 acres and a spring. Make coffee, she said quietly. This is going to take a while. And as Caleb lit the lamp and stoked the stove, as Iris set down the spade and sank into a kitchen chair like all the strength had left her legs, the last light of day faded completely. The darkness that came in its wake felt prophetic. The coffee took longer to brew than it should have. Caleb watched Iris's hands as she measured the grounds, steady, deliberate, like she was buying herself time to arrange words she'd kept locked away. The kitchen lamp cast long shadows across the table between them, and outside the Montana night settled in with its usual chorus of crickets and distant cattle lowing. When she finally sat down across from him, two steaming cups between them, her face had that carved stone quality again, prepared for judgment. Thomas Harlan was 23 when we married, she began without preamble. I was 19. My father had died the winter before, and my mother the summer after that. Cholera. I had no family, no money, and no prospects. When Thomas showed interest, when his family approved the match, I thought... She stopped, lips pressing together. I thought I was fortunate. Caleb said nothing, just wrapped his hands around the hot cup and waited. He was charming at first, brought me flowers, said pretty things. The Harlans had money, land, standing in the community. His mother made it clear I was marrying up, that I should be grateful for the opportunity, so I was. Grateful. The word came out bitter. I was so damned grateful I didn't see what was underneath all that charm until it was too late. What was underneath? Caleb asked quietly. Iris's fingers tightened around her cup. Cruelty. The casual kind at first. Little comments about my cooking, my appearance, my worthlessness. How lucky I was that he'd taken pity on me. How no one else would have wanted damaged goods. She took a breath. Then the casual kind became the deliberate kind. He'd break things I cared about, small things, a hairbrush my mother had given me, a book I'd had since childhood, and say it was an accident. He'd grab my arm hard enough to bruise and apologize so sweetly afterward that I'd feel guilty for flinching. Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd known men like that. Hell, he'd grown up with a father like that.
The Harlans knew? He asked. They knew. They didn't care. Thomas was the youngest, the favored one. Joseph was ambitious and Marcus was dutiful, but Thomas was the charmer, the one who could talk his way into or out of anything. They indulged him. When I went to his mother once, showed her the bruises, she told me that marriage required patience, that I needed to learn to manage his moods better. Iris's laugh was harsh. Manage his moods, as if his temper was my responsibility. How long did this go on? 3 years. 3 years of walking on eggshells, trying to be smaller, quieter, more invisible, trying to be whatever would make him happy, so he'd stop. She stopped herself, jaw working. But nothing ever made him happy. Not for long. He drank, more and more as time went on. When he drank, he got mean. When he got mean, he got rough. And when I finally started fighting back, when I stopped apologizing for existing, he got dangerous. The kitchen was silent except for the soft hiss of the oil lamp. Caleb could see the effort it took her to keep her voice steady, to push these words out into the light where they could be examined. The night he died, she continued, he'd been drinking since noon. We'd had a fight. I'd burned the supper or folded his shirts wrong. I can't even remember what started it. He went out to the barn, took a bottle with him. I thought he'd sleep it off in the hay like he sometimes did. I went to bed. She paused, and Caleb saw her throat work as she swallowed. Around midnight, I heard shouting, not words, just noise. I got up, went outside, and I could hear him in the barn loft stumbling around, cursing. I called up to him, asked if he was all right. He screamed at me to mind my own business, that he didn't need a useless woman checking on him. So I went back inside. And then? And then nothing. I went to bed. I fell asleep. In the morning, Marcus came pounding on the door. They'd found Thomas at the bottom of the loft ladder. His neck was broken. The bottle was shattered next to him. The whole loft reeked of whiskey. Iris met Caleb's eyes directly. He fell. He was drunk, it was dark, and he fell. That's the truth. Caleb studied her face, looking for deception and finding none. Just exhaustion and something that might have been shame. But, he prompted, because there was clearly more. But I heard him fall, she said softly. I was in the house, and I heard the crash, the sound of the bottle breaking. I heard it, and I knew something had happened, and I didn't get up. I didn't go check. I just lay there in the dark and listened to the silence afterward. The confession hung between them like smoke. I didn't kill him, Iris continued, her voice gaining strength. But I didn't save him either. I don't know if he died instantly or if he lay there suffering. I don't know if I could have done anything, but I didn't try. And when they found him dead in the morning, my first feeling wasn't grief. It was relief. Caleb let that settle. He'd seen death before, the clean kind and the messy kind, the deserved kind and the senseless kind. He'd learned that the world wasn't simple, that sometimes the worst thing you could do was nothing, and sometimes doing nothing was the only mercy available. The Harlans blamed you, he said. Not at first. At first it was all sympathy and tragedy. Poor Thomas, poor Iris. What a terrible accident. She stood abruptly, moving to the window, staring out at darkness. I lived with them after, because where else was I going to go? The house had been Thomas's, which meant it belonged to the family. I had nothing of my own. So I stayed, and I grieved the way a widow was supposed to grieve, and I tried to be grateful for their charity. What changed? Iris's reflection in the dark window looked ghostly, insubstantial. About 6 months after Thomas died, Marcus's wife Emma came to me. Late one night, when everyone else was asleep, she was crying. She told me that Marcus had started drinking more, getting rough with her the way Thomas used to get rough with me. She asked me how I'd survived it for so long. Caleb felt the pieces starting to shift, the pattern emerging. I told her the truth, Iris said. I told her I'd survived by becoming stone, by feeling nothing, by waiting for it to end. And then I told her that when it finally did end, when Thomas died, I hadn't been sorry. I told her that some deaths were blessings in disguise. Emma told the family. Not exactly. She told Marcus in a fight. screamed at him that she hoped he'd fall off a ladder too, since that seemed to be what it took to escape a Harlan marriage. Marcus told Joseph. Joseph. She turned from the window and her face was hard. Joseph saw an opportunity to get rid of you, to make me disappear without looking like the kind of family that throws out their dead son's widow. If they just kicked me out, people would talk. The church would disapprove. Their reputation would suffer. But if I was dangerous, if there was a question about whether I'd actually killed Thomas, if I was a woman who'd admitted to being glad her husband was dead, well, then sending me away was just prudent, protective. The calculation was cold and precise. Caleb could almost admire it in a sick way. Almost. They couldn't accuse you outright without proof, he said, working through it. But they could create doubt, make you seem suspicious, let rumors do the work. Exactly. Joseph came to me with an offer. He knew about you, knew you were looking to expand, knew you'd negotiated for land before. He said he'd sell you the 20 acres Thomas had owned, my land, technically, as his widow, in exchange for me coming here. Fresh start, he called it. A chance for me to find peace away from painful memories. Her voice dripped contempt. I knew what it really was. Exile. But I also knew if I refused, if I made trouble, they'd find a way to make those rumors official. They'd twist everything. The fact that I'd heard him fall and didn't help, that I'd been relieved he was dead, that I'd told Emma some deaths were blessings. They'd make it sound like murder. So you came here. I came here. Better exile than prison. Better your cold hospitality than their poisoned charity. She returned to the table, sinking back into her chair. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought they'd gotten what they wanted. Me gone, their reputation intact and profitable land sold in the bargain. I thought I'd finally be free of them. But now they're back, Caleb said, with questions they didn't have before. Or questions they're only now willing to make official. Iris's hands were shaking slightly. She pressed them flat on the table. They'll go to the sheriff. They'll tell him about the rumors, about what I said to Emma, about how I didn't check on Thomas when I heard the fall. They'll make it sound damning, and maybe it is damning. Maybe I am guilty of something, even if it's not murder. Maybe wanting someone dead is crime enough. Caleb drank his coffee, which had gone lukewarm. The bitter taste matched his mood. Did you want him dead? He asked. Iris didn't flinch from the question. Yes. Toward the end, yes. I used to lie awake at night imagining it, all the ways it could happen. Accident, illness, violence. I wasn't particular about the method. I just wanted to be free. Does that make me a murderer in my heart? Makes you human, Caleb said. Makes you someone who is trapped and desperate. Doesn't make you guilty of a crime. The law might see it differently. The law requires proof, evidence. They've got nothing but speculation and the word of a woman who was fighting with her own husband. Caleb leaned back, thinking. Besides, if they were really convinced you'd killed Thomas, they would have gone to the sheriff a year ago. This is about something else. What? I don't know yet, but men like Joseph Harlan don't do anything without a reason. He didn't just wake up yesterday with a sudden attack of conscience about his brother's death. Something's changed. Something's made you a threat again when you should have been safely forgotten out here. Iris considered this, and Caleb saw the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the mind that had survived 3 years of cruelty by learning to read dangerous men. The land, she said slowly, Thomas's land, my land. The 20 acres. What if it's worth more than they thought? What if they found out something about it after they'd already sold it to you? What if... She stopped, eyes widening. The spring. That's what you wanted, wasn't it? The natural spring on the northern border? Caleb nodded. Makes the land twice as valuable. Water rights out here are worth their weight in gold. Joseph knows that. He would have known that when he negotiated with you. But what if there's more? What if someone discovered minerals, or the railroads coming through, or... She stood again, pacing now, energy crackling through her small frame. If they can prove I murdered Thomas, what happens to the land? It would revert to the family, Caleb said, following her logic. A murderer can't profit from her crime. You'd lose your widow's claim, the sale would be void, and the land would go back to the Harlans. And they could sell it again, for whatever it's really worth. The pieces clicked into place with ugly clarity. This wasn't about justice for Thomas.
This wasn't even about punishing Iris. This was about money, about land, about the oldest motivation in the Montana Territory, greed dressed up as righteousness. We need to know what changed, Caleb said. What made that land suddenly worth reclaiming? How do we find that out? I'll go to town tomorrow, talk to people. The land office, the surveyor, maybe the railroad company office if there is one. Someone will know if there's been new developments. He met her eyes across the table. But we need to be ready for them to come back before I find answers. They said they'd bring the sheriff, and I believe them. We need to figure out what you're going to say. The truth, Iris said. I'll tell the truth. The truth is complicated. The truth makes you look suspicious even if you're innocent. Then what do you suggest? That I lie? Caleb shook his head. I suggest you tell the truth carefully. You heard your husband in the barn. You called to him. He told you to leave him alone. You went to bed. You woke up when Marcus came with the news. That's all factual. That's all true. But I heard him fall. Did you? Caleb interrupted. Are you sure what you heard was him falling? Could have been anything. A bottle breaking, tools clattering. Could have been him knocking things over while he was drunk. You were half asleep in a house 50 feet from the barn. You can't be certain what you heard. Iris stared at him, understanding dawning. You want me to change my story. I want you to tell a version of the truth that doesn't hand them ammunition. The part about being glad he was dead, about telling Emma that his death was a blessing, that's between you and Emma and whatever conscience you've got. It's not evidence of a crime. And if they bring it up, you say you were speaking emotionally, that you were hurt and angry about your marriage, and you said things you regret. That's reasonable. That's understandable. That's manipulation, Iris said, but there was no heat in it, just weariness. That's survival, Caleb corrected. Joseph Harlan is playing a game, and he's playing it to win. If you walk into this treating it like a confessional, like honesty will save you, you're going to lose. You need to be smarter than that. You need to be harder than that. For a long moment, Iris didn't respond. Then slowly, she nodded. All right, she said. All right. I'll be careful with the truth. They sat in silence after that, the coffee growing cold between them. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying with it the smell of rain that might or might not come. The lamp flickered, and Caleb reached over to turn up the wick. Why are you helping me? Iris asked suddenly. You got your land. The bargain's complete. You could let them take me, wash your hands of the whole mess, keep the property. Why fight for someone you barely know? Caleb had been asking himself the same question since he'd faced down the Harlan brothers in his yard. The practical answer was that if the sale was voided, he'd lose the land anyway. But that wasn't the whole truth, and they'd just spent an hour talking about the importance of truth. I don't like being played, he said finally. I don't like being used. Joseph Harlan sold me that land knowing full well he might try to take it back. He made me part of his scheme without my knowledge or consent. That sits wrong with me. That's not the only reason, Iris said, watching him with those two perceptive eyes. No, it wasn't. The other reason was sitting across from him with her tired face and her survivor's spine, looking like she'd been fighting alone for so long she'd forgotten what it was like to have someone in her corner. The other reason was that he'd seen too many people get ground down by those with power and money and cruelty, and he'd promised himself a long time ago that he wouldn't be the kind of man who looked away. No, he admitted, it's not. Iris's expression softened just slightly. Thank you, for what it's worth. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything. They're coming back, and when they do, it's going to get ugly. I know, but at least this time I won't face it alone. Something about the way she said it, simple, factual, grateful, made Caleb's chest tight. He stood abruptly, gathering the coffee cups. You should get some sleep, he said gruffly. Morning comes early and I need to leave for town at first light. Iris stood as well, but she didn't move toward her room. Instead, she walked to the window again, looking out at the darkness. I started that garden, she said quietly, because I wanted to believe I could stay here. That maybe this place could be more than just exile. That maybe I could plant something and watch it grow and have a future that wasn't just running or hiding or waiting for the next bad thing. She turned to face him. If they take me away, if this all goes wrong, will you keep the garden? The question caught him off guard. It was such a small thing, such a simple request, and yet it felt enormous. I will, he said. I promise. She nodded, satisfied, and finally retreated to her small room off the kitchen. Caleb heard the door close softly, the rustle of her preparing for bed. He stood in the kitchen for a long time after, staring at the darkness beyond the windows, thinking about gardens and promises and the strange way life had of taking simple bargains and turning them into something far more complex. Eventually, he banked the fire, turned down the lamp, and made his way to his own room at the back of the house. But sleep didn't come easy. He lay awake listening to the wind, planning what he'd say and where he'd go and how he'd fight if it came to that. And in the room off the kitchen, Iris Dalton lay awake too, wondering if honesty had ever really saved anyone, or if survival always required a little bit of careful sin. The morning came gray and threatening, clouds piling up on the western horizon like a bruise. Caleb was up before dawn, moving quietly through the house so as not to wake Iris. But when he emerged from his room, she was already in the kitchen, fully dressed, pulling biscuits from the oven. "You don't sleep much," he observed. "Habit. Thomas liked his breakfast early. Old patterns die hard." She set a plate in front of him without being asked. Biscuits, eggs, bacon she must have fried while he was getting dressed. "Eat. You'll need your strength." Caleb ate, and the food was good, better than anything he'd made himself in years. When he finished, Iris handed him a wrapped package. "Lunch," she explained, "for the road." "Mrs. Dalton." "Iris," she interrupted. "If we're going to be conspirators and manipulating the truth, we should probably use first names." A small smile tugged at Caleb's mouth. "Iris, then, and I'm Caleb." "I know. I've heard the neighbors." She poured him coffee for the road, using a tin cup with a lid. "Be careful in town. The Harlans have friends there, people who'll report back to them." "I'm aware. And if you find out something about the land, something that proves why they want it back, I'll come straight back here. I won't let them catch me alone on the road." He stood, settling his hat. "Keep the doors locked while I'm gone. Don't open them for anyone unless it's me or the sheriff with a legal warrant. And if it's the sheriff—" "Tell the truth carefully," Iris finished. "I remember." Caleb hesitated at the door, then turned back. "Last night, you asked why I was helping you. I didn't give you the whole answer." "What's the whole answer?" He looked at her standing in his kitchen in the early morning light, this woman who'd been sent to him like a curse and was turning into something else entirely. "I think," he said slowly, "that the Harlans made a mistake. They thought they were dumping a problem on me. But what they actually did was give me someone who knows how to fight, someone who's survived worse than they can throw at us. And I've got a feeling we're going to need that before this is over." Iris's eyes went bright, and for a moment he thought she might cry, but she didn't. She just nodded once, sharp and fierce. "Ride safe," she said. "Keep the doors locked," he repeated, and left before he could say anything else, anything more, anything that might reveal how much this strange arrangement was starting to mean to him. The ride to town took 3 hours through increasingly threatening weather. By the time Caleb reached the main street, the wind was fierce and cold, carrying the smell of rain and electricity. He tied his horse outside the land office and stepped inside, grateful for the shelter. The clerk, a nervous man named Peterson, looked up from his ledgers with obvious relief at having something to do besides watch the storm build. "Caleb Monroe," he said. "Don't see you in town often. What can I do for you?" "I need to see the records on a property sale, 20 acres on the northern border of my land, sold to me by Joseph Harlan about 6 weeks ago." Peterson's expression shifted, became guarded. "That's public record. I can pull the file." He disappeared into the back room, and Caleb waited, watching the street through the window. The town was quieter than usual, people hurrying to get home before the weather broke. He didn't see any Harlans, but that didn't mean they weren't around. Peterson returned with a folder, laying it on the counter. "Here you are. Deed transfer, survey map, the usual documentation." Caleb studied the papers, looking for anything unusual. The sale seemed straightforward. 20 acres, clear title from Thomas Harlan's estate to the family, then from the family to him. The price was fair for grazing land with a spring. Nothing obviously suspicious. "Has anyone else been looking at this file recently?" he asked. Peterson hesitated. "I'm not supposed to say." Peterson. "Look, Caleb, I don't want trouble. The Harlans are They're influential. I can't afford to make enemies. Caleb leaned on the counter, keeping his voice low and reasonable. I'm not asking you to make enemies. I'm asking if someone's taken an interest in property I now own. That's a legitimate concern for a landowner. The clerk chewed his lip, then sighed. Joseph Harlan was here 2 weeks ago, wanted to see the survey map, spent a long time studying it, asked about mineral rights. There it was, the confirmation they needed.
Mineral rights, Caleb repeated. Did he say why? No, but right after he left, a man came in. Well-dressed, city type. Asked to see the same map, said he was with a mining company out of Denver. Caleb felt his pulse quicken. What kind of minerals? Didn't say, but he was real interested in the spring area. Asked if the water rights were included in your purchase. Peterson lowered his voice further. Between you and me, Caleb, I'd hold tight to that land. Word is there might be silver in those hills. Not a lot, maybe, but enough to make it worth someone's time. Silver. Of course. It explained everything, why the Harlans wanted the land back, why they were willing to destroy Iris's reputation to get it, why Joseph had that particular gleam in his eye. Thank you, Peterson. This helps. Caleb, be careful. The Harlans don't take kindly to people standing between them and money. I'm learning that. Caleb left the land office just as the first heavy drops began to fall.
He should have headed straight back to the ranch, but something made him detour to the sheriff's office. Better to know if the Harlans had made their accusations official yet. Sheriff Tom Brennan was a fair man, as far as Caleb knew, but he was also practical. He enforced the law, but he was also aware of who held power in the county. When Caleb walked in, Brennan looked up from his desk with an expression that was half greeting, half wariness. Caleb, didn't expect to see you today. Didn't expect to be here. But I've got a situation and I wanted to get ahead of it. This about the Harlan matter? So they had been here. Caleb kept his expression neutral. Depends on what they told you. Brennan sighed and leaned back in his chair. Sit down. Let's talk about this before it gets out of hand. Caleb sat, water dripping from his coat, onto the wooden floor. Joseph and Marcus Harlan came to see me yesterday, Brennan began. Said they've got concerns about their brother Thomas's death. Said his widow, who I understand is staying at your place now, might have had something to do with it. Based on what evidence? Based on the fact that she heard him fall and didn't check on him. Based on things she said to family members about being glad he was dead. Based on... He paused. Look, Caleb, they've got enough to make me ask questions. That's all this is right now, questions. Questions that conveniently arise right after a mining company shows interest in land that belonged to Thomas's widow. Brennan's eyes sharpened. What are you talking about? Caleb told him about the land sale, about Peterson's information, about the timing of the Harlan's sudden concern for justice. When he finished, Brennan was silent for a long moment. You're saying this is about mineral rights, not murder, the sheriff finally said. I'm saying the timing is suspicious as hell. They were happy enough to ship Iris off to my place 6 weeks ago. Now suddenly they're worried she might be a killer, right after someone discovers there might be silver on that land? That's speculation. So is their murder theory. Difference is, mine has a financial motive that makes sense. Brennan rubbed his face. This is going to be a mess. It doesn't have to be. You investigate properly. You look at the evidence, or lack of it. You consider the timeline. You ask yourself who benefits if Iris Dalton is convicted of murder. And if I determine there's enough evidence to bring charges, then we'll deal with that when it comes. But I'm asking you to be thorough, to not let the Harlan's influence push you into arresting a woman based on gossip and speculation. The sheriff studied him for a long moment. You've gotten mighty protective of a woman you've known for less than 2 months. I've gotten protective of what's right, Caleb corrected. There's a difference. Outside thunder rumbled, close enough to rattle the windows. The storm was here. I'll investigate properly, Brennan said finally. But I will investigate. I'll need to talk to Mrs. Dalton. And if the evidence points toward her involvement, if the evidence actually points that way, I won't stand in your way. But make sure it's evidence, Tom. Not just the word of men who have a lot to gain from her being found guilty. Caleb stood to leave, but Brennan called him back. One more thing. The Harlans mentioned that Mrs. Dalton's husband had been rough with her, that there was violence in the marriage. You asking or telling? I'm saying that if that's true, it gives context. Doesn't excuse murder if it happened, but it gives context. Juries understand self-defense. They understand desperate women in bad situations. It was as close to sympathy as a lawman could offer while still doing his job. Caleb nodded once. I'll keep that in mind. The ride home was miserable. The storm broke fully just as Caleb left town, turning the road into a river of mud. Rain came down in sheets, cold and punishing, and lightning split the sky with enough frequency to spook his horse. It took twice as long to get back to the ranch, and by the time he arrived, soaked through and shivering, full dark had fallen. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the kitchen window. Caleb put his horse in the barn, rubbing him down and giving him extra feed for enduring the journey, then slogged through ankle-deep mud to the house. Iris had the door open before he reached it, and her face was tight with worry. I was starting to think something had happened, she said, pulling him inside. Storm slowed me down. He stripped off his dripping coat, his hat, but I found out what we needed to know. He told her everything, the mining company, the silver, Peterson's information, his conversation with the sheriff. As he spoke, he watched the expressions cross her face. Anger, vindication, fear, determination. So they're going to destroy me for silver that might not even be there, she said when he finished. They're going to try. But now we know what we're fighting, and knowledge is leverage. Iris moved to the stove where she'd kept dinner warm despite not knowing when, or if, he'd return. She dished him a plate of stew, set it in front of him with the same automatic care she'd shown that morning. The sheriff will come, she said. Soon, probably. Maybe even tomorrow if the weather clears. Probably. And I'll tell the truth. Carefully. Yes. She sat down across from him, hands folded on the table. Outside, the storm raged against the house, but inside the lamplight was warm. The air smelled like beef and vegetables, and for a moment it felt almost peaceful. Caleb, Iris said quietly, whatever happens, whatever they do or say or try, I want you to know that these last few weeks, being here, having space to breathe and think and just exist without fear, it's been more than I had any right to expect. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Hope, she said simply. The possibility that life could be different, better. That's worth fighting for, don't you think? Caleb looked at her across the table. This woman who'd arrived like unwanted cargo and had somehow become essential to the working of his days. Who'd taken his spare room and turned it into a home, his abandoned garden into a promise of green things growing. Who'd been sent as punishment and revealed herself as treasure. Yes, he said, it's worth fighting for. And when the storm finally wore itself out hours later, when the rain gentled to a whisper and the thunder moved off toward distant mountains, they were still sitting there in the lamplight, making plans and building strategies and preparing for the battle they both knew was coming. Outside, the garden she'd planted lay flattened by the storm, all that careful work undone by weather's indifference. But come morning, they would see that some things had survived, that roots ran deeper than anyone expected, that what looked destroyed might only be resting, gathering strength for what came next. The morning after the storm dawned clear and cold, the kind of crystalline brightness that made everything look sharp-edged and new. Caleb woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon, sounds that had become familiar over the past weeks but still carried a strange comfort. He dressed quickly and emerged to find Iris already outside, surveying the damage to her garden. He joined her in the muddy yard, following her gaze to the flattened rows of seedlings. The storm had been merciless. Young tomato plants lay broken and scattered, bean poles had been torn from the ground, and the carefully turned soil had washed into runnels and gullies. Weeks of work destroyed in a single night. Iris stood perfectly still, her face unreadable. Then, slowly, she crouched down and began examining the wreckage more closely. Her fingers moved through the mud, checking roots, testing stems. Some of them made it, she said quietly. The carrots, maybe. They're deep enough. And these beans here, see? The roots held. They're bent but not broken. Caleb crouched beside her, seeing what she saw. Amid the destruction, there was survival. Stubborn, unlikely survival. We can replant, he said. I'll help. We've got time before the growing season ends. Iris turned to look at him, and something in her expression made his chest tight. Gratitude, yes, but also something fiercer. Determination that had been tested and found unbreakable. When they come, she said,
and they will come. I need you to let me handle it my way. Can you do that? Depends on what your way is. My way is standing my ground, not hiding, not apologizing, not making myself small. I've spent too many years doing that. She stood, wiping mud on her already dirty skirt. I'm done being the person everyone wants me to be. If they're going to accuse me, let them do it to my face. Let them see what I've become. Before Caleb could respond, the sound of horses carried across the morning air. Multiple horses, coming from the east. They both turned toward the road, and Caleb felt his hand drift instinctively toward his hip, where his revolver rested. That was faster than I expected, Iris murmured. 4 riders emerged from the tree line. Sheriff Brennan in front, recognizable by his badge even at a distance. Behind him, Joseph and Marcus Harlan. And a 4th man Caleb didn't recognize, dressed in town clothes, carrying what looked like a leather document case. "Who's the 4th?" Iris asked. "Don't know. Lawyer, maybe." They waited in the yard as the riders approached, neither retreating nor advancing. Caleb positioned himself slightly in front of Iris, not blocking her but making his presence clear. A statement without words. The riders pulled up at a respectful distance. Sheriff Brennan dismounted first, his weathered face neutral and professional. Joseph Harlan followed, that politician's smile already in place. Marcus looked uncomfortable, and the 4th man simply observed with cold, calculating eyes. "Caleb, Mrs. Dalton." Brennan tipped his hat. "I apologize for the early visit, but this matter needs addressing." "Sheriff," Caleb acknowledged, "you want to come inside, have some coffee while we talk?" "I'm afraid this isn't a social call." Brennan pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Mrs. Dalton, I have questions regarding the death of Thomas Harlan. I need you to come into town. Give a formal statement. It's not an arrest," he added quickly, seeing Caleb's expression darken. "Just questions. Official record." "Questions based on what evidence?" Caleb demanded. Joseph Harlan stepped forward. "Based on information that's come to light suggesting my brother's death wasn't the simple accident we all believed it to be." "Information," Iris said, her voice cutting and clear. "You mean rumors you've been spreading, stories you've twisted to serve your purpose." Joseph's smile never wavered. "I mean testimony from family members, statements you made about being glad Thomas was dead, about his death being a blessing. Those are your words, Iris, your admission." "Admission of what? Relief that an abusive marriage ended? That's not a crime, Joseph. That's honesty." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "Iris, nobody's saying you meant to. We just need to understand what happened that night. For closure. For the family." "The family?" Iris repeated, and laughed without humor. "The family that watched Thomas terrorize me for 3 years and did nothing. The family that told me to be more patient, more understanding, more invisible. That family wants closure?" The 4th man finally spoke, his voice smooth and educated. "Mrs. Dalton, I'm Arthur Pemberton, attorney for the Harlan estate. Perhaps we could discuss this more civilly. The sheriff is simply doing his duty in investigating questions that have arisen. Surely you can see the wisdom in cooperating." "I can see the wisdom in knowing who I'm dealing with," Iris shot back. "An estate attorney. Interesting. Tell me, Mr. Pemberton, what exactly is the Harlan estate claiming? What legal grounds do you have for questioning a death that was ruled accidental a year ago?" Pemberton's expression didn't change, but Caleb saw his eyes sharpen. This woman wasn't going to be easily intimidated. "The estate has the right to pursue justice for one of its members," Pemberton said carefully, "and to ensure that any irregularities in his death are properly investigated." "Irregularities," Caleb said. "Is that what we're calling convenient timing now? Funny how these irregularities only became important after a mining company showed interest in the land Thomas owned." Silence fell like a stone into water. Joseph's smile finally slipped. Marcus looked genuinely confused. Pemberton's face went carefully blank. "I don't know what you're implying," Joseph started. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. 2 weeks ago, you were at the land office asking about mineral rights on the 20 acres you sold me. Right after that, a mining representative came asking the same questions. Now suddenly you're concerned your brother might have been murdered? The timing raises questions, Joseph. Questions about your motives."
Brennan's expression had gone very still. Is this true? About the mining company? It's public record, Caleb said. Peterson at the land office will confirm it. Someone's interested in what's under that ground. And if Iris is convicted of murder, the sale becomes void. The land reverts to the Harlan estate, which can then sell it for whatever those mineral rights are really worth. That's absurd, Joseph sputtered, but his face had gone red. This is about justice for Thomas, not about silver, Iris finished quietly. Not about money? Then why is an estate attorney here, Joseph? Why not just the sheriff asking honest questions? Pemberton stepped in smoothly, damage control in action. Mrs. Dalton, whatever Mr. Monroe believes about mineral interests is irrelevant to the central question. Did you or did you not hear your husband fall the night he died and fail to render assistance? The question hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Caleb saw Iris's jaw tighten, saw her prepare to answer, and remembered their conversation about truth and survival. He willed her to be careful, to remember what they'd discussed. I heard something, Iris said slowly, each word precise. I was in the house. Thomas was in the barn. I heard a crash, yes, loud enough to wake me, but I couldn't tell what it was. Could have been anything. Tools falling, a board breaking, Thomas knocking things over while he was drunk. But you didn't check, Pemberton pressed. My husband had told me in very clear terms to leave him alone. He'd been drinking heavily. He was in a foul mood. I'd learned over 3 years of marriage that when Thomas was in that state, approaching him only made things worse. She met Pemberton's eyes directly. So no, I didn't check. I stayed in the house where it was safe, where he'd told me to stay. And in the morning, when they found him dead, how did you feel? It was a trap question, designed to make her admit relief, to confirm the statements Emma had reported. Caleb tensed, ready to intervene, but Iris's voice stayed level. I felt shocked, she said. Grief, confusion. The things anyone feels when they lose someone suddenly. Not relief? Pemberton's tone was sharp now, sensing blood in the water. You didn't tell Marcus's wife that his death was a blessing? I told Emma months later in a private conversation about marriage and survival that some endings come as relief. That was about my experience of marriage, not about Thomas's death. You're twisting my words, Mr. Pemberton. You're taking private grief and private pain and trying to turn them into evidence of a crime that never happened. Marcus finally spoke up, and his voice was strained. Iris, Emma said you told her you weren't sorry he was dead, that you were glad it ended. And if I did say that, Marcus, if I said I wasn't sorry to be free of a man who bruised me, who broke my things, who made me afraid in my own home, does that make me a murderer? Or does it make me human? The words struck like physical blows. Marcus flinched. Joseph's face darkened further. Even Pemberton looked momentarily uncomfortable. Sheriff Brennan cleared his throat. Mrs. Dalton, nobody's accusing you of murder. Not yet. But I do need you to come into town. Make an official statement. We need to document all of this properly. I'll give you a statement right here, Iris said. Right now, I have nothing to hide. It needs to be official, in town, with witnesses. Then bring your witnesses here, because I'm not leaving this property voluntarily. If you want to arrest me, Sheriff, show me your warrant, show me your evidence, show me anything besides the word of men who have every reason to lie and a fortune to gain from my conviction. Brennan looked genuinely torn. Caleb could see him weighing duty against justice, law against fairness. Iris, the sheriff said, and the use of her first name was deliberate, personal. I'm trying to do this the right way. Don't make me do it the hard way. The hard way is what the Harlans have planned, Iris replied, dragging me into town, making a spectacle, letting the whole county see the murderous widow being questioned, planting doubt in everyone's minds before there's even a trial. I won't play that game, Tom. I won't help them destroy me. Joseph had clearly had enough. Sheriff, she's refusing to cooperate. That's obstruction. You have grounds to— I have grounds to ask questions, Brennan interrupted, his voice hard. I don't have grounds to arrest anyone based on speculation and family drama. And that's what this is starting to look like, Joseph. Drama, politics, maybe even fraud. How dare you? Peterson told me about your visit to the land office. about the mining company, about your questions regarding mineral rights. Brennan's expression was granite now. You want to pursue this investigation? We'll pursue it. But we'll pursue all of it, including your motives, including the timing, including whether you're trying to use the law to steal back land you already sold. The air crackled with tension. Caleb's hand stayed near his revolver, ready for this to go sideways at any moment. But it was Pemberton who broke the standoff, his lawyer's instincts recognizing when to retreat. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, "perhaps we should step back, reassess our approach. Mrs. Dalton has agreed to give a statement. Sheriff Brennan is willing to investigate. Let's not turn this into something uglier than it needs to be." "It's already ugly," Iris said quietly. It was ugly from the moment the Harlans decided their profit was worth more than the truth. Joseph's face was purple now. "You ungrateful! We took you in after Thomas died, gave you a home, provided for you. You made me a servant in your house," Iris cut him off. "You treated me like I owed you for the privilege of being widowed. And when I became inconvenient, when keeping me around reminded you too much of your brother's cruelty, you traded me away like livestock. Don't you dare talk to me about gratitude, Joseph. You wouldn't recognize it if it bit you." Marcus made a sound like he'd been punched. Even Brennan looked taken aback by the venom in Iris's voice. But Caleb felt something like pride watching her stand there in her mud-stained dress, shoulders straight, eyes blazing, refusing to be diminished. "I think," Sheriff Brennan said heavily, "we all need to calm down. Mrs. Dalton, I will need that statement eventually. But I'm willing to take it here on your terms, if you're willing to cooperate." "When?" Iris asked. "Tomorrow. I'll bring a deputy as witness. Keep it official but small. We'll document what happened the night Thomas died, what you saw and heard, what you did. That's all. No accusations, no charges. Just facts." Iris considered this, then nodded. "Tomorrow. But only you and your deputy, Sheriff. No Harlans, no lawyers. Just the law." "Agreed." Joseph looked like he wanted to argue, but Pemberton put a restraining hand on his arm. The lawyer had clearly recognized that pushing harder now would only make things worse. "This isn't over," Joseph said, his voice low and ugly. "You think you're clever, hiding behind Monroe and his land, but the truth will come out. One way or another, Iris, you'll answer for what you did." "I already have answered," Iris replied. "The truth is I survived you. I survived your family. I survived Thomas. And I'll survive this too, no matter what you throw at me." The riders turned to leave, but Marcus lingered a moment longer. He looked at Iris with something that might have been regret. "He really hurt you," Marcus said quietly. "Thomas. Emma told me some of it, but I didn't want to believe it." "I know," Iris said, and her voice softened slightly. "It's hard to see the worst in people we love, but that doesn't make the worst any less real." Marcus nodded slowly, then followed his brother and the lawyer back toward town. Sheriff Brennan was the last to mount up. "Mrs. Dalton," he said to him, "Caleb, tomorrow, like we agreed. And for what it's worth—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I knew Thomas Harlan. Drank with him a few times. He had a mean streak when he was in his cups. I didn't know it extended to his home life, but I'm not surprised to hear it. That doesn't mean I can ignore questions about his death, but it does mean I'll investigate fairly, all aspects of it." "That's all we're asking," Caleb said. After they left, Caleb and Iris stood in the yard, watching the dust settle. The confrontation had lasted maybe 20 minutes, but Caleb felt exhausted, adrenaline draining from his system. "You were magnificent," he said finally. Iris laughed shakily. "I was terrified." "Didn't show. You stood up to them like—" He searched for the right words. "Like someone who knows her worth, who won't be pushed around anymore." "Is that what I look like?" She turned to face him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Because I felt like I was about to fly apart. The whole time I kept thinking about what Thomas would have done if I'd spoken to him that way, how much it would have cost me. But you're not married to Thomas anymore. You don't answer to the Harlans. You don't have to make yourself small to survive." "I know. It's just—" She wiped at her eyes impatiently. "It's just that knowing something and believing it are different things. I spent so long being afraid, being careful, measuring every word. Standing there, saying exactly what I thought, feeling angry instead of scared. It felt like putting on someone else's skin. Maybe it's not someone else's skin, Caleb suggested gently. Maybe it's who you were before Thomas, who you're becoming now that you're free of him. Iris considered this, then nodded slowly. Maybe. It's strange, isn't it? How people can change you, make you forget who you were. Thomas spent 3 years teaching me to disappear, and I got so good at it I almost couldn't find my way back. They walked back toward the house together, the morning sun warming the muddy ground. Inside, Iris immediately set about making more coffee, hands needing something to do, some familiar task to ground her. "What do you think will happen tomorrow?" she asked, measuring grounds with the same precision she'd shown that first day. "When Brennan comes back for the statement, I think you tell him exactly what you told them today, the truth, carefully. What you heard, what you did, why you did it. He seems like a fair man. He'll listen. And after that, Joseph won't let this go. He's too invested now, too angry. After that, we wait. See what Brennan's investigation turns up. See if this mining company makes an official claim on the land. See if the Harlans overplay their hand." Iris poured 2 cups, handed one to Caleb. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared so many meals now, where plans had been made and truths had been told. "I've been thinking," Iris said slowly, "about what happens if this goes bad. If despite everything, if they find a way to make charges stick, to take me to trial." "Don't," Caleb interrupted. "Don't plan for the worst, plan for winning. I need to be realistic. If I'm arrested, if I'm convicted, the land would revert to the Harlans. You'd lose everything you paid for. Everything you're fighting for. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. But if it does," she reached across the table, put her hand over his. The touch was unexpected, warm. "If it does, I need you to know that I don't expect you to keep fighting. You've already done more than anyone had the right to ask. If it comes down to saving yourself or standing with me, you save yourself. Promise me that." Caleb looked at her hand on his, at the calluses they shared from hard work, at the strength in her fingers. Then he turned his hand over, lacing their fingers together. "I'm not making that promise," he said firmly, "because I'm not planning to abandon you. This isn't just about land anymore, Iris. This is about what's right. About not letting bullies win. About—" He stopped, surprised by what he was about to say, but pushed forward anyway. "About protecting something I've started to care about." Her eyes widened. "Caleb, I'm not saying this to complicate things. I'm saying it because you should know where I stand. You came here as part of a bargain, yes, but you've become more than that. You've become someone I respect, someone I—" He paused, choosing his words. "Someone I want in my life, not as an obligation, as a choice." Iris's throat worked. "That's the kindest thing anyone said to me in longer than I can remember. It's just the truth." "The truth," she repeated softly. "We keep coming back to that, don't we? The truth in all its complications." They sat there in the morning light, hands joined across the table, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this. 2 people who'd found each other through circumstance and were choosing, deliberately, to stay found. Then Iris pulled her hand back gently, stood, and walked to the window. "We should check the herd. After the storm, make sure none of them are injured or strayed." It was a retreat, a step back from the intimacy of the moment, and Caleb let her take it. They had time. Whatever was building between them didn't need to be rushed. It would grow or it wouldn't, but right now they had more immediate concerns. They spent the rest of the day working the ranch, checking fence lines and counting cattle, falling back into the familiar rhythms of labor. The physical work was grounding, pushing anxiety about tomorrow into the background. By evening, they were both exhausted, and dinner was a quiet affair. That night, Caleb lay in his bed listening to the house settle, thinking about everything that had happened. About Iris standing in the yard, fearless in the face of men who wanted to destroy her. About her hand in his, warm and real. About the possibility that this strange arrangement might become something more. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, his dreams were troubled. Visions of courtrooms and accusations, of Iris being led away in chains, of the garden dying in neglect. He woke before dawn to the sound of voices outside. Low, urgent voices. Male voices that didn't belong. Caleb was on his feet instantly, revolver in hand, moving through the dark house. He could hear Iris stirring in her room, the quick rustle of someone dressing in a hurry. Through the front window he saw them, at least 6 men on horseback, circling the house in the pre-dawn darkness. Some carried torches, the flames casting wild shadows. Others had rifles across their saddles. "Caleb!" Iris appeared beside him, fully dressed, eyes wide. "Who are they?" Before he could answer, a voice called out from the darkness. Joseph Harlan's voice, thick with drink and rage. "Monroe! Send out the murderer, or we'll come in and get her." Caleb's blood went cold. This wasn't a legal delegation. This was a mob, and they'd come in the dead of night when no sheriff would see, no witnesses would intervene. "Stay back from the windows," he told Iris urgently. "Get down. Stay low." "What are they doing? It's not even dawn. The sheriff isn't supposed to come until—" "This isn't the sheriff." Caleb moved to the gun cabinet, pulling out his rifle. "This is the Harlans taking matters into their own hands." Another voice joined Joseph's, slurred and angry. "We know what you did, Iris. We know you killed him. Come out and face justice." "That's not Joseph," Iris whispered. "That sounds like, is that Robert, Thomas's cousin?" "Sounds like they've recruited help. Probably been drinking all night, working themselves up." Caleb checked his ammunition, calculating odds he didn't like. 6 men, maybe more, all armed, all convinced of Iris's guilt, or at least willing to pretend they were. "We need to get to town," Iris said. "Get to the sheriff." "We'd never make it. They're between us and the road. The moment we step outside, they've got us." A gunshot cracked through the air, and the front window shattered. Iris screamed, dropping to the floor as glass rained down. Caleb fired back through the broken window, aiming high, a warning shot. "The next man who shoots gets 1 center mass," he shouted. "This is my property, and you're trespassing. Leave now, or I start putting you down." Big words for a man protecting a killer. Joseph's voice was closer now, emboldened by numbers and darkness. "Hand her over, Monroe. This doesn't have to involve you. It involved me the moment you made that land deal, the moment you lied about your intentions. I know about the silver, Joseph. I know this is about money, not justice." A moment of silence. Then Joseph's laugh, ugly and knowing. "So what if it is? So what if the land's worth more than we thought? That doesn't change what she did. That doesn't change that she murdered my brother. She didn't murder anyone. Thomas fell because he was drunk. You know it, I know it, and when the sheriff investigates properly, the whole county will know it." "The sheriff's not here," another voice called out. Marcus, sounding less certain than his brother, but still committed to this course. "And by the time he arrives tomorrow, this will all be settled. Iris will have confessed to what she did, and justice will be served." "You mean she'll have had an accident," Caleb said flatly. "Isn't that what this is? You'll claim she tried to run? Someone's gun went off. Tragic mistake? That's the plan, isn't it?" The silence that followed confirmed his suspicion. They'd come to kill Iris and make it look justified, to eliminate the problem permanently before official investigations could complicate their story. Caleb felt Iris's hand on his arm, felt her shaking despite her attempt to stay calm. "There's 6 of them," she whispered. "Maybe more. You can't fight them all." "Don't have to fight them all. Just have to make them think twice about whether I'm worth the cost." He raised his voice again. "Here's how this works. I've got enough ammunition to make this very expensive for you. First man through my door dies. Second man probably dies. Third might make it, but he'll be answering murder charges because I'll make damn sure one of you survives to testify about who started this. Is that land worth 3 of your lives? Is it worth hanging for murder?" "You're bluffing," Joseph shouted, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Try me. Come on, Joseph. You first. Show your men how brave you are. Walk through my door and see what happens." Movement in the darkness. Caleb tracked it with his rifle, ready to fire if anyone got too close. Then a new voice, younger, frightened. "Joseph, maybe we should wait for the sheriff like we planned. This is getting out of hand." "Shut up, Robert." "But he's right. If we kill them, that's murder. That's hanging. The land's not worth—" "I said shut up!" The mob was fracturing, doubt seeping in. Caleb pressed his advantage. "Smart man, Robert. Listen to him, the rest of you. Think about what you're doing. Think about what happens when the sun comes up and people find out a group of armed men attacked a woman in her home in the middle of the night. Think about how that looks. Think about what the sheriff will do." Nobody will care about a murderer getting what she deserves, Joseph snarled, but his conviction was wavering. They'll care about a lynch mob. They'll care about men taking the law into their own hands. Montana Territory is trying to become a state, remember? We're trying to prove we're civilized, that we have law and order. You think the territorial government wants this kind of story getting out? Caleb was reaching now, throwing everything he could think of at them, trying to find the crack that would break the mob's resolve. And what about the mining company? He continued. You think they want to buy land that comes with a murder attached? Think they want that kind of publicity? You're not just risking your necks, you're risking the very money you're trying to protect. More movement. Horses shifting, men conferring in low voices. The torches seemed to be pulling back slightly. Then, from the darkness, a different sound, hoofbeats approaching fast from the direction of town, multiple riders moving with purpose. Someone's coming, Iris breathed. The mob heard it too. Caleb saw them turning, confusion spreading. The riders burst into the clearing, 4 of them, led by Sheriff Brennan, with his deputy and 2 other men Caleb recognized as town council members. What the hell is going on here? Brennan's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. Joseph Harlan, you and your men lower those weapons right now. Sheriff, this doesn't concern... The hell it doesn't? You've got an armed mob surrounding a private residence in the middle of the night. That's criminal trespass at minimum, attempted murder at worst. Weapons down, now. The authority in Brennan's voice, combined with the presence of witnesses and town officials, finally broke the mob's momentum. Rifles lowered, torches were held less aggressively. Men who'd been ready to kill 20 minutes ago suddenly looked sheepish and uncertain. Caleb didn't lower his own weapon. Not yet. Not until he was sure this was really over. Brennan dismounted, striding toward the house. Caleb, you and Mrs. Dalton all right? Windows shot out, but we're unharmed. Anyone fire back? Warning shot only, over their heads. Good. That's self-defense. Brennan turned to face the mob. The rest of you? You've got explaining to do, starting with why you thought vigilante justice was a good idea. Joseph tried to rally. We have reason to believe Iris Dalton murdered my brother. We were within our rights to... You were within your rights to bring your concerns to me, which you did yesterday. You were not within your rights to form a mob and attack her home. That's what the law is for, Joseph, to handle these things properly, not whatever this is. The law's too slow, one of the other men shouted. She'll run. She'll disappear before justice can be served. Mrs. Dalton agreed to give me a statement today. She wasn't running. She was cooperating, which is more than I can say for you lot. Brennan's gaze swept across them, and even in the dim light, Caleb could see his disgust. You should all be ashamed. This isn't how civilized men behave. This is mob rule, and I won't have it in my county. Marcus pushed his horse forward. Sheriff, you thought you'd take the law into your own hands. You thought numbers and guns made you right. Well, you thought wrong, and now you're all facing charges, criminal trespass, destruction of property, assault with deadly weapons, attempted murder if I can prove intent. That got their attention. Fear rippled through the group, men realizing they'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Now, Brennan continued, his voice like iron, you're all going to turn around and ride back to town, slowly, peacefully. And tomorrow morning, each of you is going to come to my office and give a statement explaining what you thought you were doing here tonight. Based on those statements, I'll decide who gets charged with what. Are we clear? Nods all around. Even Joseph, purple-faced and furious, knew when he was beaten. And Joseph, Brennan added, if I find out you put these men up to this, if I find out you organized this mob, you'll be the first one I charge. Think about that on your ride home. The mob dispersed slowly, reluctantly, men slinking away into the growing dawn like dogs caught stealing. Soon, only the sheriff and his small group remained. Brennan approached the house, and Caleb finally lowered his rifle. Iris stood, visible in the broken window, and the sheriff's expression softened. Mrs. Dalton, I apologize. This should never have happened. I should have anticipated they might try something like this. How did you know to come? Iris asked. Emma Harlan, Marcus's wife. She rode to town in the middle of the night, told me the men had been drinking, talking about taking care of the problem themselves. She was terrified of what they might do. Brennan shook his head. Brave woman, going against her husband's family like that.
I'll have to thank her, Iris said quietly. Right now, I need to know if you want to press charges. You'd be within your rights. They terrorized you, destroyed your property, threatened your lives. Caleb looked at Iris, letting it be her decision. She thought for a long moment, then shook her head. No charges. Not against the men who came with Joseph. They were drunk and stupid and following someone else's lead. But Joseph? Her voice hardened. Joseph organized this. Joseph put them up to it. Him, I want prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Brennan nodded. I can work with that. And it might actually help your case. Shows that the Harlans are willing to break the law to get what they want. Undermines their credibility. When do you need that statement? Iris asked. Still today, if you're up for it. Later, though. Give you time to clean up, calm down. He looked at the broken window, the bullet holes in the frame. I'll send someone out to board that up, make your house secure again. Appreciate it, Sheriff. After Brennan and his men left, Caleb and Iris stood in the growing light, exhaustion and relief warring for dominance. The danger had passed. They'd survived. But the cost, the fear, the violence, the reality of how far the Harlans would go settled over them like ash. That was close, Iris finally said. Too close. If the sheriff hadn't come, but he did. Emma saved us. Saved you. Iris moved to the broken window, glass crunching under her boots. She knows what it's like, being trapped in a Harlan marriage, watching men you're supposed to trust turn into monsters. She couldn't save me from Thomas, but she could save me from Joseph. Caleb came to stand beside her, and together they watched the sun rise over the damaged yard, over the flattened garden, over land that had become a battleground. This isn't over, he said quietly. They'll try again. Maybe not like this, but they'll find another way. I know. Iris turned to look at him, and despite everything, the fear, the exhaustion, the danger, her eyes were clear. But I'm not running. Whatever comes next, I face it here, on my own ground, with someone beside me who sees me as more than just an inconvenience to be disposed of. Caleb reached for her hand, found it, held it. Then we face it together, he said. Whatever comes next. We face it together. And as the sun climbed higher, burning away the shadows of the terrible night, they stood together in the ruins and the survival, two people who'd been brought together by calculation and were choosing, in the light of a new day, to stay together by something far stronger. The battle wasn't over, but they'd survived the first assault, and in surviving, they'd found something worth fighting for, something that looked a lot like hope. The morning sun was fully up by the time Sheriff Brennan's carpenter arrived to board up the shattered window. Caleb and Iris had swept up the glass, cataloged the damage, and were sitting at the kitchen table with coffee. Neither of them was drinking when the sound of hammering began. Iris flinched at each strike, and Caleb noticed her hands trembling slightly as she gripped her cup. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind the raw reality of what had almost happened. You should try to rest, he said quietly. You've been up all night. So have you. I'm used to it. Calving season, you learn to function without sleep. I'm not delicate, Caleb. I don't need coddling. But her voice lacked conviction, and when she set down her cup, some of the coffee sloshed over the rim. Without thinking, Caleb reached across the table and covered her shaking hand with his. No one's saying you're delicate. You stood in that window and stared down 6 armed men. You're the furthest thing from delicate I've ever seen. But being strong doesn't mean you can't be scared. Doesn't mean you can't admit when something shook you. Iris looked down at their joined hands, then slowly turned hers over, lacing their fingers together like she had the day before, like it was becoming natural. I thought they were going to kill us, she said softly. When I heard Joseph's voice, when I saw those torches, I thought this was it, that I'd survived Thomas only to die at his family's hands anyway. And the worst part was thinking you'd die too, because of me, because of a bargain you made that turned into so much more than you agreed to. I knew what I was getting into when I faced them down that first day, Caleb said. Maybe not the specifics, but I knew the Harlans were trouble. I knew taking you in would come with complications. I chose it anyway. Why? It was the same question she'd asked before, and this time Caleb had a better answer, or at least a more honest one. Because the first time I saw you step down from that wagon,
You looked like someone who'd been fighting a war alone for too long. And I know what that feels like. My father—" He stopped, surprised to find himself going there, to that territory he never visited. "My father was a hard man, mean when he drank. My mother learned to make herself invisible, just like you did. Learned to take the blame for his moods, his failures, his cruelty. I was 10 when she finally left him, packed a bag, took me with her, never looked back." Iris's grip on his hand tightened. "Where did she go?" "Her sister's place in Colorado. We lived there until I was old enough to work, old enough to take care of her. She died when I was 23. Pneumonia. But she had 6 years of peace before that. 6 years of not being afraid, of not measuring every word, every action, every breath against someone else's temper." He met Iris's eyes.
"When you told me about Thomas, about what he did to you, I saw my mother. I saw what she survived, and I thought, if I can give you what she had, even just a few years of peace, of safety, of being able to breathe, then that's worth whatever comes with it." Tears spilled down Iris's cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. "She raised a good man. She raised a stubborn one, not sure it's the same thing." "It is." Iris squeezed his hand once more, then gently withdrew, using both hands to wipe her face. "All right, enough sentiment. We have work to do. The sheriff will be here this afternoon for my statement. I need to be ready." They spent the next hours preparing. Caleb wrote down everything he knew about the land sale, the mining company interest, the timeline of Joseph's visits to the land office. Iris went over and over the events of the night Thomas died, refining her story, making sure every word was both true and careful. By the time Brennan returned with his deputy, a young man named Charlie Hayes, early afternoon, they were as ready as they'd ever be. The sheriff sat up at the kitchen table, pulling out papers and a pen. "Mrs. Dalton, this is just a formal accounting of what happened the night your husband died. Deputy Hayes will witness and sign. Anything you say can be used in court if this goes to trial, so I need you to be truthful and complete. Do you understand?" "I understand." Brennan began with basic questions: her name, her marriage to Thomas, the date of his death. Then he moved into the substance. "Walk me through that night. Start from dinner." Iris took a breath and began. Her voice was steady, each detail measured and clear. She described the fight, though she softened it, saying only that Thomas had been upset about something she'd done, that he'd been drinking. She described him going to the barn, her going to bed, the crash she'd heard, how she'd thought it was just Thomas being careless in his drunken state. "You didn't check on him?" Brennan asked, his pen scratching across paper. "No. Thomas had made it very clear he wanted to be left alone. When he was in that mood, approaching him only made things worse." "Made things worse how?" Iris hesitated, and Caleb saw her making a calculation. How much truth to tell? How much to protect herself versus how much to expose the reality of her marriage? "Thomas had a temper," she said finally, "especially when he drank. He could be rough, verbally and physically. I'd learned it was safer to give him space until he calmed down." Brennan's pen stopped moving. He looked up at her, his weathered face grave. "Are you saying he was violent with you?" "Yes." "How often?" "Often enough that I knew the pattern, knew when to stay away, when to be silent, when to make myself scarce." Iris's voice didn't waver. "I'm not proud of that, Sheriff. I'm not proud that I learned to live that way, but survival sometimes means swallowing your pride." "Did you ever report this violence to anyone?" "I told his mother once. She said marriage required patience, that I needed to manage his moods better." Brennan's jaw tightened. He made a note, then continued. "So you went to bed. Then what?" "I fell asleep. In the morning, Marcus came pounding on the door. Said they'd found Thomas at the bottom of the loft ladder. His neck was broken. That's when I knew the crash I'd heard was him falling." "And how did you feel when you learned he was dead?" There it was, the trap question, the one Pemberton had tried to use against her. Iris met Brennan's eyes directly. "I felt shocked," she said. "Grief. Confusion about what had happened, and—" She paused. "And relief. Relief that the marriage was over, that I'd never have to be afraid of him again. Is that what you're asking, Sheriff? Whether I was glad my husband was dead? Yes, I was. But being glad someone's dead isn't the same as killing them. Brennan studied her for a long moment. No, Mrs. Dalton, it's not. And being honest about complicated feelings takes courage. Most widows lie about that part. I'm tired of lying about what my marriage was. Tired of pretending Thomas was something he wasn't to protect the Harlan family reputation. Even if that honesty makes you look guilty? Even then. Because the truth is my only real defense. The truth is that I didn't kill my husband. I didn't help him die. I just didn't save him. And maybe that makes me a bad person. Maybe that makes me cold-hearted, but it doesn't make me a murderer. The room was silent except for the scratch of Brennan's pen as he wrote. Deputy Hayes, who'd been standing quietly by the door, shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Dalton, the sheriff said after he'd finished writing, I need to ask you directly. Did you in any way cause or contribute to Thomas Harlan's death? No. Did you tamper with the ladder? Put anything on the rungs to make them slippery? Do anything at all that might have caused him to fall? No. I was in the house. I was in bed. I didn't go near that barn until the next morning when Marcus took me out there to see Thomas's body. Did you want him dead? Iris didn't hesitate. Yes. Toward the end, yes. I wanted to be free, and death seemed like the only way that would happen. But wanting something and doing something are different things. I wanted him dead the way someone drowning wants air, desperately, abstractly, without any real plan or power to make it happen. When it did happen, when he fell, I didn't cause it. I just didn't prevent it. And I won't apologize for that. Brennan set down his pen and leaned back. All right, that's clear enough. Now tell me about the Harlans' behavior after Thomas died. How did they treat you? This part was easier. Iris described living with the family, the subtle and not so subtle hostility, the way they'd made her feel like a burden. She told him about the conversation with Emma, about how it had been twisted and used against her. And then they came to you with the offer to come here, Brennan prompted. Joseph presented it as charity, a fresh start, but I knew what it really was. They wanted me gone, and they'd found a convenient way to make it happen that made them look generous instead of cruel. Did they mention any concerns about Thomas's death at that time? None. It was all about giving me a new beginning, helping me move forward. There was no suggestion that they suspected me of anything. And now, suddenly, they have these suspicions. Suddenly, Iris agreed, after a mining company showed interest in land that belonged to me as Thomas's widow, land they sold to Caleb, land that would revert to them if I was convicted of murder. Brennan nodded slowly. Caleb, your turn. Tell me about the land sale. Caleb went through it all. The initial negotiation, Joseph's approach, the bargain that included taking in Iris. He showed Brennan his notes about the land office visits, about the mining company representative, about the timing. What exactly did Peterson tell you about the mineral interest? Brennan asked. He said a man from a Denver mining outfit came in right after Joseph, asked to see the same survey maps, was particularly interested in the spring area, mentioned silver. Did Peterson give you a name, a company? No, but he seemed to think it was legitimate interest, said I should hold tight to the land. Brennan made more notes, his expression thoughtful. This puts things in a different light. Joseph came to me yesterday talking about justice and family honor. He didn't mention anything about mineral rights or mining companies. Because it undermines his whole story, Caleb said. Makes it obvious this isn't about Thomas's death. It's about money. Alleged money, Brennan corrected. We don't actually know if there's silver there. Could be the mining company was just doing preliminary surveys. Could be nothing comes of it. But Joseph doesn't know that, Iris pointed out. He just knows someone's interested enough to ask questions, and he knows that if I'm convicted, the land comes back to him and he can profit from whatever's there. Brennan closed his notebook and stood. All right, here's where we are. Mrs. Dalton, your statement is consistent and credible. You admit to wanting your husband dead, but you also make a clear distinction between desire and action. The physical evidence from a year ago, Thomas's body, the broken bottle, the condition of the loft, all supports an accidental fall by an intoxicated man. There's no evidence of foul play. So I'm cleared? Iris asked,
hope creeping into her voice. Not officially. Not yet. I still need to investigate the Harlan's claims. Talk to Emma and anyone else who might have relevant information. Look into this mining company situation. But based on what I've heard today and what I know of the case, I don't see grounds for charges. The most I see is a tragedy, a woman in a bad marriage who didn't act to save a man who'd abused her. That's not a crime. That's human nature. Relief washed over Iris's face, but Caleb remained cautious. What about Joseph? What about last night? Brennan's expression hardened. Last night is a different matter entirely. Joseph Harlan organized a mob to attack your home. That's criminal. I'll be charging him with criminal conspiracy, incitement to violence, and attempted assault at minimum. The other men will face lesser charges since they were following his lead, but Joseph is going to answer for what he did. Will that stick? Caleb asked. He's got money, influence, a good lawyer. He's got Pemberton, who's smart enough to know when his clients crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. And he's got witnesses against him, his own men who'll talk to save themselves, and Emma who can testify about the planning. Brennan moved toward the door. Justice moves slow sometimes, but it does move. Joseph Harlan is going to learn that the hard way. After the sheriff left, Caleb and Iris stood in the quiet house, processing everything. The formal statement was done. The investigation was moving in their favor. Joseph would face consequences for his actions. It felt like a victory, but a tentative one, like standing on ice that might crack at any moment. Do you believe him? Iris asked. That I won't be charged. Brennan's a straight shooter. If he says he doesn't see grounds for charges, I believe him. But Joseph won't give up. Even if he's facing criminal charges himself, he'll find a way to keep fighting. Caleb nodded. Which is why we need to get ahead of this. We need to know for certain what's under that land. If there really is silver, if the mining company makes an official claim, then we have leverage. Proof that this was never about justice. How do we find out? We go to the source, the mining company office in Denver if we have to. But first, he thought for a moment. First, we talk to Peterson again. See if he can give us more information about who exactly came asking questions. A name, a company, anything we can trace. That's a day's ride at least, 2 days round trip. I know, which means leaving you here alone. Iris straightened her shoulders. I can handle myself. I've got the rifle, I know how to use it, and after last night, the Harlans know they can't intimidate me. I'll be fine. I don't like it. I don't like it either, but we need that information. She moved closer to him, and Caleb was struck again by how tall she was, how she met his eyes almost level. We're so close, Caleb, so close to proving what they did, why they did it. We can't stop now just because of fear. She was right, and he knew it. But the thought of leaving her alone, vulnerable, made his chest tight with worry he hadn't felt in years. Somewhere along the way, this practical arrangement had become something else. Somewhere between her first defiant stand in her garden in the mud, between shared coffee and joined hands, she'd become someone he couldn't bear to lose. All right, he said finally. I'll leave at first light tomorrow. Should be back by evening the next day. But you promise me, anything looks wrong, anything feels off, you ride straight to town. Don't wait, don't investigate, just go. I promise. They spent the rest of the afternoon in careful preparation. Caleb checked and double-checked the rifle, showed Iris again how to load and fire it quickly. They went over plans for different scenarios. What if Joseph came back? What if the mob returned? What if Pemberton showed up with legal papers? By evening, they were both exhausted, strung tight with tension that had nowhere to go. Dinner was quiet, and afterward, Iris surprised him by asking if he played cards. Used to, he said. Been years, though. I found a deck in that drawer by the stove. Thought maybe we could use a distraction, something to do with our hands besides worry. So they played poker at the kitchen table, betting matches instead of money, and slowly the tension began to ease. Iris was good, better than Caleb expected, and she caught him trying to bluff twice. Thomas taught me, she said when he commented on her skill. One of the few good things he did. Said a woman who could play cards could hold her own in any situation. He was right about that, at least. As the evening wore on, their conversation drifted from cards to other things. Iris asked about his mother, and Caleb found himself telling stories he hadn't shared in years. about how she used to sing while she cooked, how she'd taught him to read using an old book of poems, how she'd been fierce in her gentleness. "She would have liked you," he said without thinking, then felt his face heat. "I mean, she would have respected how you stand up for yourself, how you don't let people push you around." Iris smiled, and it transformed her face, softening the hard edges that survival had carved there. "I would have liked her too. Any woman who could leave a bad situation and build a new life. That takes strength most people don't have." "Is that what you're doing? Building a new life?" The question hung between them, weighted with everything they hadn't said, everything that had been building since that first tense day. "I'm trying to," Iris said slowly. "Whether I succeed or not depends on what happens next, on whether the Harlans win or lose, on whether—" She stopped, seemed to gather courage. "On whether there's a place for me here when all this is over. A real place. Not just as part of a bargain." Caleb set down his cards. "There's a place for you here as long as you want it. Bargain or no bargain. Land or no land. I thought I made that clear." "You did. But I needed to hear it again. Needed to know it wasn't just the crisis talking, the heat of the moment making you say things you might regret later." "I don't regret anything I've said to you, and I won't regret it later either." He reached across the table, and this time when their hands met, it felt different, less like comfort and more like promise. "When this is over, when the Harlans are dealt with and the land is secure, we'll figure out what comes next, together, if that's what you want." "It's what I want," Iris said quietly. "More than I've wanted anything in a long time." They sat there in the lamplight, hands joined, and Caleb felt something settle in his chest. A decision made. A course set. Whatever happened with the Harlans, whatever the investigation revealed, this was real. This mattered. This was worth protecting. Eventually, they said goodnight, retreating to their separate rooms. But as Caleb lay in his bed, staring at the dark ceiling, he found himself thinking not about the journey tomorrow or the dangers ahead, but about the possibility of a future he hadn't dared imagine. A future where Iris stayed not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she chose to. Where the garden bloomed and the house felt like a home instead of just a structure. Where he wasn't alone anymore. It was a good thought, a hopeful thought. And hope, Caleb had learned, was sometimes the most dangerous thing of all, because it gave you something to lose. He was up before dawn, moving quietly through the house. But Iris was already awake, already dressed, already preparing food for his journey. "You didn't have to do this," he said, watching her wrap bread and cheese in a clean cloth. "I wanted to. Besides, you'll need your strength." She handed him the package, then a canteen filled with fresh water. "Be careful. Don't trust Joseph's people in town. He might have someone watching the land office." "I'll be careful." They walked outside together. The morning was cold and clear, stars still visible in the west. Caleb saddled his horse, checking the cinch twice, stalling. "Caleb," Iris said, "it's going to be fine. I'll be fine. Go do what needs doing." He turned to face her and on impulse pulled her into a brief, tight embrace. She stiffened for just a moment, then relaxed into it, her arms coming up to circle his back. "2 days," he said into her hair. "I'll be back in 2 days." "I'll be here." He pulled back, climbed into the saddle, and rode out as the sun was just breaking the horizon. When he looked back, Iris was standing in the yard, one hand raised in farewell, and the sight of her there, strong and solitary and waiting, made his heart ache. The ride to town took most of the morning. Caleb went straight to the land office, arriving just as Peterson was unlocking the door. "Back again?" the clerk said, not unkindly. "You're persistent, I'll give you that. Need more information about that mining company representative? You remember anything else about him? A name, maybe? What company he was with?" Peterson thought for a moment. "He didn't give me a company name, just said he was doing survey work, but he had papers, official-looking things. I saw a letterhead. Something with Continental in it, I think. Continental Mining or Continental Resources, something like that." "What did he look like?" "City man, 40-something, well-dressed, had a scar here." Peterson touched his left cheek. "Talked educated, not from around here." It wasn't much, but it was something. He say anything about what they were looking for specifically? Just asked about water rights and mineral rights, wanted to know who owned what, who had claims filed. Standard survey questions. Did Joseph Harlan talk to this man? See him while he was here? Peterson's eyes shifted. Can't say for certain, but look, Caleb, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Joseph was waiting outside when the mining man left. I saw them talking on the boardwalk. Brief conversation, maybe 5 minutes. Then they went their separate ways. So Joseph had made contact with the mining company, had probably learned exactly how valuable that land might be. It was another piece of the puzzle, more proof that this whole situation was orchestrated. Peterson, if I need you to testify to this, to what you saw, what Joseph asked about, would you? The clerk paled. Testify? In court? Against the Harlans? Maybe, if it comes to that. Caleb, I can't afford to make enemies with that family. They've got influence. They've got money. They've got a habit of breaking the law when it suits them. And they almost killed 2 people 3 nights ago because of land they're trying to steal. Is that the kind of people you want to protect? Peterson was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. If Sheriff Brennan asks me officially, if it's legal and proper, I'll tell what I know. But I won't volunteer it. I've got a family to think about. Fair enough? And Peterson, thank you. This helps more than you know. Caleb spent the rest of the day tracking down what information he could about continental mining. The telegraph office had no record of any official surveys filed with the territorial government. The assayer's office had no samples submitted for testing. It was all preliminary, all unofficial, which meant either the mining company was being very careful or there was less there than everyone hoped. By the time Caleb started the ride back to the ranch, late afternoon sun slanting golden across the grassland, he had enough pieces to build a picture. Joseph had learned about potential mineral value. He'd made contact with the mining representative. He'd realized that the land he'd sold to Caleb might be worth far more than he'd thought, and he'd decided to get it back by any means necessary, including destroying Iris's reputation and possibly her life. It was greed, pure and simple, greed dressed up as justice, and Caleb had the proof now to expose it. He pushed his horse harder than he should have, anxiety gnawing at him. 2 days, he'd said, but it had been more like a day and a half, and he wouldn't rest easy until he saw Iris standing in that yard, safe and whole. The sun was setting when he finally saw his property line. The house came into view, and relief flooded through him. Everything looked normal, peaceful. No signs of trouble. Then he saw the second horse tied outside. A horse he didn't recognize. Caleb's hand went to his revolver as he approached slowly, eyes scanning for threats. The front door was closed. No sounds came from inside. No signs of struggle. He dismounted quietly, tied his horse, and moved toward the house with the revolver drawn. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open carefully. Inside, Iris sat at the kitchen table across from a woman Caleb had never seen before. Both turned as he entered, and Iris's face broke into a relieved smile. Caleb, thank heavens, I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. Whose horse is that outside? The other woman stood, and Caleb saw she was young, pretty, with red-rimmed eyes like she'd been crying. I'm Emma Harlan, she said quietly. Marcus's wife. I needed to talk to Iris. To tell her everything. Caleb lowered his weapon but didn't holster it. Everything about what? Emma looked at Iris, who nodded encouragement. Then she turned back to Caleb, and her voice was steady despite the tears. Everything about why the Harlans really want Iris gone. About what they're hiding. About what I know they did. And in the fading light of that evening, with truth finally ready to emerge from shadow, the final pieces of the Harlan conspiracy began to fall into place. Caleb holstered his revolver and closed the door behind him, his eyes never leaving Emma Harlan's tear-streaked face. The young woman looked terrified but determined, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Sit down, Iris said to Caleb gently. Emma's been here for about an hour. She has information we need to hear. Caleb pulled out a chair and sat, his mind racing. Emma Harlan had saved their lives by warning the sheriff about the mob. Now she was here, in their home, looking like she was about to confess to murder herself.
Start from the beginning, he said, keeping his voice calm. Tell me what you told Iris. Emma took a shaky breath. The night Thomas died. The real story isn't what the family told everyone. It isn't what they put in the report. Thomas didn't just fall because he was drunk. Caleb felt his pulse quicken. What do you mean? I mean Joseph was there that night, at the barn. I saw him.
Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. Marcus and I had been at dinner with the family. We left late, around 11. But Marcus had forgotten something, some papers Joseph wanted him to look at. We turned back. When we rode up to Thomas's place, I saw Joseph's horse tied behind the barn, hidden, like he didn't want anyone to know he was there. Iris had gone very still. You never told me this. I never told anyone. I was afraid. I am afraid. Emma wiped at her eyes. Marcus went inside to find the papers. I waited with the horses, and I heard voices from the barn, raised voices. Thomas and Joseph arguing. About what? Caleb asked. I couldn't make out most of it, but I heard Thomas say something about my land, and you can't have it. And Joseph said something back about Thomas being a fool, about wasting opportunities. Then there was a crash, and silence. And Joseph came out of the barn, walking fast, looking shaken. He saw me sitting there and just froze. The kitchen was so quiet Caleb could hear his own heartbeat. Emma continued, her words coming faster now, like a dam breaking. He came over to me and grabbed my arm, told me I hadn't seen anything, that I hadn't been there, that if I said anything, if I told anyone, he'd make sure Marcus suffered for it, make sure we lost everything. He was calm when he said it, almost friendly. That made it worse somehow. What did you do? Iris asked. I nodded. I agreed. I was so scared. And Marcus was inside, and Joseph was... He's always been the dangerous one, the one who gets what he wants no matter who gets hurt. So I kept quiet. And when Marcus came back out, I didn't say anything. And the next morning when they found Thomas dead, when everyone was crying and shocked, I kept quiet then too. You think Joseph killed him, Caleb said flatly. You think he pushed Thomas. I don't know. I truly don't know. Maybe Thomas fell on his own and Joseph just happened to be there. Maybe they fought and Joseph pushed him in anger. Maybe it was an accident. But Joseph was there and he lied about it. He's been lying about it for a year. And now he's trying to blame Iris for something he might have done himself. Iris stood abruptly and moved to the window, her back to them. Caleb could see her shoulders shaking, could see her fighting for control. Why now? He asked Emma. Why are you telling us this now? Because of the mob. Because I saw what Joseph was willing to do, gathering those men, working them into a frenzy, sending them here to hurt Iris, maybe kill her. Because I realized he'd go as far as he needed to protect himself and get what he wants. And because... Her voice broke. Because I can't live with the guilt anymore. I can't watch an innocent woman be destroyed for something she didn't do while I stay silent about what I know. Will you testify to this? Caleb demanded. Will you tell the sheriff? Emma's face crumpled. If I do, Marcus will never forgive me. His family will destroy us. Joseph will make good on his threats. We'll lose everything. You'll lose your soul if you don't, Iris said, turning from the window. Her voice was hard but not unkind. I know what it's like to keep quiet to survive, Emma. I know what it costs. But there comes a point where survival isn't enough, where you have to decide what kind of person you want to be. I'm so scared, Emma whispered. So am I. So is Caleb. We're all scared. But we're here, and we're fighting, and we're not letting them win. You can do the same. Iris came back to the table and knelt beside Emma's chair. You saved our lives when you warned the sheriff. You're braver than you think. And this time, you won't be alone. This time, you'll have us standing with you. Emma looked between them, and slowly, something shifted in her expression. Fear was still there, but something else joined it. Resolution. The same stubborn strength that Iris had found, that had carried her through hell and out the other side. All right, Emma said. All right. I'll tell Sheriff Brennan everything I know. But we have to do this right. We have to have more than just my word against Joseph's. We do, Caleb said. I've got proof that Joseph met with a mining company representative, that he was asking about mineral rights after he'd already sold the land. That establishes motive. Your testimony establishes opportunity and deception. And Iris's statement establishes that she had no involvement. Put it all together, and Joseph has a lot of questions to answer. There's more, Emma said. Something else you should know. The original deed to Thomas's land, the one that should have passed to Iris as his widow, Joseph has it locked in his safe. I've seen it. He told Marcus he needed to keep it secure for legal purposes, but I think he's been planning this all along, planning to claim this land was never Iris's to inherit, because— She stopped, looking sick. Because if she killed Thomas, she can't inherit. The property reverts to the family, and if there's no deed in Iris's name, if Joseph controls all the documentation, he can claim whatever he wants. Caleb felt cold fury settle in his gut. He's been planning this from the beginning. The moment he learned about the mining interest, he started setting up the pieces. Get Iris away from the family so she can't defend herself. Plant doubts about Thomas's death. Gather evidence that makes her look guilty. Then swoop in, reclaim the land, and profit from whatever's underground. It's fraud, Iris said. Conspiracy. Possibly murder. It's all of that, Caleb agreed. And now we can prove it. Emma, is there any way to get that deed from Joseph's safe? Marcus has the combination. Joseph gave it to him in case of emergency. But Marcus would never— Would he if he knew the truth about his brother's death? If he knew what Joseph's really been doing? Emma's face went through a series of emotions: hope, doubt, fear, determination. I don't know. Marcus loves his family, but he's also a good man. If I told him everything, if he believed me, maybe. Maybe he'd help. That's a risk, Iris warned. If Marcus chooses Joseph over the truth, we lose the element of surprise. But if he chooses right, we get the proof we need to bury Joseph's whole scheme, Caleb countered. Emma, how well do you know your husband? Really know him? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was stronger than it had been. Marcus isn't like Joseph. He's never been cruel, never been calculating. He follows Joseph's lead because that's what he's always done, because Joseph's older and smarter and more forceful. But Marcus has a conscience. I've seen it. When he drinks now, when he gets rough with me, he cries afterward, apologizes, hates himself. He's not a bad man. He's just a weak one who's been following a bad man's example. Then we take the risk, Caleb decided. We bring Marcus in. Tonight, if possible. The longer we wait, the more chance Joseph has to cover his tracks or make another move against us. Iris looked at him sharply. You trust this? No, but I trust that Emma knows her husband, and I trust that we're running out of time. Joseph's facing criminal charges for the mob attack. He's desperate. Desperate men do desperate things. It was decided. Emma would ride home, tell Marcus she needed to speak with him privately, bring him to the ranch under the pretense of checking on Iris after the attack. Once here, they'd confront him with everything: Emma's testimony, the evidence about the mining company, the timeline of Joseph's deception. And they'd see which way Marcus Harlan jumped when forced to choose between his brother's schemes and the truth. After Emma left, Caleb and Iris prepared for what might be their final confrontation with the Harlans. They checked weapons, rehearsed what they'd say, steeled themselves for the possibility that Marcus would side with Joseph and this whole thing would blow up in their faces. If this goes wrong, Iris said as they waited in the gathering dusk, if Marcus warns Joseph and they come at us together, then we fight. We've got the truth on our side. We've got the sheriff. We've got each other. Caleb reached for her hand. That's more than they have. 2 hours after Emma left, they heard horses approaching. 2 riders this time. Caleb positioned himself near the door, hand on his revolver. Iris stood by the table, straight-backed and ready. The knock, when it came, was tentative. Iris? It's Marcus. Emma said you wanted to talk to me. Caleb opened the door. Marcus Harlan stood there, looking confused and worried, with Emma behind him. He was a softer version of Joseph. Same build, same features, but with uncertainty where Joseph had arrogance. Come in, Caleb said. Both of you. They entered, and Marcus's eyes went immediately to Iris. Emma said you had information about Thomas's death. Something I needed to hear. Sit down, Marcus, Iris said quietly. This is going to be difficult.
For the next half hour, they laid it all out. Emma told her story first, haltingly but completely. She described seeing Joseph at the barn, hearing the argument, witnessing Joseph's threat. Marcus's face went from confused to shocked to devastated as his wife spoke. Then Caleb presented his evidence, Peterson's testimony about Joseph and the mining representative, the timeline of the land sale. The way Joseph's sudden concerns about Thomas's death aligned perfectly with the discovery of potential mineral wealth. Finally, Iris spoke about her marriage to Thomas, about the abuse she'd suffered, about the Harlans' complicity in looking the other way. She told Marcus things she'd never told anyone, details that made him flinch and Emma cry. When they finished, Marcus sat in silence for a long time. His face was gray, his hands shaking. "Joseph was there," he finally said, his voice hollow. "He was there when Thomas died, and he never said anything. All this time, while we were mourning, while we were planning the funeral, while we were—" He stopped, unable to continue. "He might have killed Thomas," Emma said gently, putting her hand on her husband's arm. "Or he might have just witnessed it and kept quiet. But either way, he lied. And now he's trying to blame Iris to cover up his own involvement and steal land that belongs to her." "Why?" Marcus asked, looking at Iris with genuine pain in his eyes. "Why would my brother do this?" "Because Joseph cares about two things," Iris said. Iris Sheehan. "Power and money. Thomas's land represents both. And I was convenient, easy to blame, easy to push aside. He probably thought I'd just disappear quietly, grateful to be free of the family. He didn't count on Caleb or on you and Emma having consciences." Marcus stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at nothing. "What do you need from me?" "The deed," Caleb said. "The original deed to Thomas's land that Joseph has in his safe. We need it to prove that Iris is the rightful owner, that the sale to me was legal, that Joseph has no claim to it. If I take that deed, Joseph will know. He'll know I betrayed him." "He's already betrayed you," Emma said fiercely. "He's been lying to you for a year, using you, making you complicit in his schemes while keeping you in the dark about what he really did." Marcus turned to face them, and his expression was tortured. "He's my brother. And I'm your wife. Iris was your sister-in-law. Thomas was your brother too. Don't you want to know the truth about what happened to him? Don't you want justice?" The silence stretched. Then Marcus nodded slowly. "I'll get the deed. Tonight. Joseph's at his lawyer's office in town, working on his defense for the mob charges. He won't be back until late. I'll get the deed and bring it to Sheriff Brennan first thing in the morning." "Why not bring it here?" Caleb asked. "Because if I bring it here and Joseph finds out, he'll claim you forced me, that you're in on some conspiracy against him. But if I take it straight to the sheriff, if I make an official statement about everything Emma told me, everything you've shown me, then it's legal. Official. Harder for Joseph to twist." It made sense. Caleb nodded. "All right. But Marcus, if you change your mind, if you warn Joseph—" "I won't." Marcus looked at Emma, and something passed between them. "I won't. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing right over easy. Better late than never." After they left, Caleb and Iris stood together in the kitchen, barely daring to hope. "Do you think he'll follow through?" Iris asked. "I think Emma will make sure he does. And I think Marcus is tired of being Joseph's puppet. Sometimes it just takes the right push to make someone stand up." They didn't sleep that night. They sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee and watching the hours crawl past, waiting for dawn and whatever it would bring. They talked about small things, the garden that needed replanting, the fence that needed mending, the normal mundane details of ranch life that suddenly seemed precious and fragile. As the sky began to lighten in the east, Iris spoke quietly. "If this works, if Marcus comes through and Joseph is exposed, what happens then?" "Then you're cleared. The land is legally yours, legally mine through our agreement. Joseph faces charges for fraud, conspiracy, possibly murder. The Harlans lose their hold over you. And after that, after all the legal dust settles?" Caleb met her eyes. "After that, you decide what you want. You're free, Iris, truly free. Free of Thomas, free of his family, free of the whole mess. You can stay here, or you can take your share of the land value and go somewhere new. Start completely over. The choice is yours. What do you want me to choose?"
It was the question he'd been avoiding, the one that scared him more than facing down armed mobs or corrupt families. But looking at her in the early morning light, seeing the woman who'd transformed from unwanted burden to irreplaceable partner, he found the courage to be honest. I want you to stay. Not because of any bargain or agreement, not because you're trapped or have nowhere else to go, but because you want to. Because this place, this life, because we could build something here, together, something real and good and ours. Iris's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. I want that too, more than anything. I want to wake up in this house and tend that garden and know that I'm here because I choose to be. That I'm building a future instead of just surviving a present. Caleb reached across the table and took both her hands in his. Then that's what we'll do. When this is over, we'll make it official. A real partnership, a real life. Are you asking me to marry you, Caleb Monroe? He hadn't meant to, hadn't planned it, but sitting there with dawn breaking and hope finally seeming possible, it felt right. It felt inevitable. Yes, he said simply. Yes, I am. When you're free, when you're ready, when all this is behind us, marry me. Be my partner in truth, not just on paper. Help me make this ranch into a home. Let me give you the peace and safety you've earned. Let us give each other the future we both deserve. Yes, Iris whispered. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They sealed it with joined hands and matching smiles, and when the sun finally broke fully over the horizon, it felt like an omen, like the darkness was finally ending and light was coming to stay. At 8 o'clock, a rider appeared on the road. Sheriff Brennan riding fast, with Marcus Harlan beside him. They both dismounted in a hurry, and Brennan's face was grim but satisfied. Marcus came to me at dawn, the sheriff said without preamble, told me everything, gave me the original deed, showed me his wife's statement about Joseph being at the barn the night Thomas died. We've got enough to bring Joseph in for questioning, possibly charge him with fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice at minimum. What about murder? Caleb asked. That's harder to prove. Emma's testimony puts him at the scene, but we don't have physical evidence that he pushed Thomas. Could have been an accident, could have been a fight that went wrong. Without more proof, the best we can do is establish he lied about being there and tried to cover it up. That's enough, Iris said. That's enough to clear my name and stop his scheme. More than enough, Brennan agreed. Mrs. Dalton, based on everything we've learned, I'm officially closing the investigation into your involvement in Thomas Harlan's death. There's no evidence of wrongdoing on your part. You're cleared. The relief was so intense, Iris swayed on her feet. Caleb steadied her, his arm around her waist, and felt her lean into him. What happens now? She asked. Now I go arrest Joseph Harlan. Marcus has agreed to testify against his brother. Emma, too. Combined with the deed fraud, the mining company connection, and the mob attack, Joseph's looking at serious prison time. He won't go quietly, Marcus said, speaking for the first time. He looked haggard, like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Joseph doesn't lose gracefully. I've got deputies waiting in town. We'll take him in properly, legally. He can fight this in court if he wants, but the evidence is overwhelming. Brennan looked at Marcus with something like sympathy. I know this is hard, testifying against family, but you're doing the right thing. Am I? Or am I just destroying what's left of my family to clear my own conscience? You're choosing truth over lies, Iris said firmly. You're choosing justice over corruption. That's always the right thing, Marcus, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. After the sheriff and Marcus left, Caleb and Iris stood in their yard, watching them ride toward town and whatever confrontation awaited. The morning was bright and clear, the kind of day that made the Montana Territory feel like the edge of possibility. It's really over, Iris said wonderingly. After all this time, all this fighting, it's actually over. The legal part is, but we've still got work to do. A garden to replant, a wedding to plan, a life to build. Iris laughed, and the sound was pure joy. When do you want to do it? The wedding? Soon, but properly. I want to court you first, do this right. Take you to town for dinner, buy you something pretty, let everyone see that you're here because we choose each other, not because of some land deal. I'd like that. Though fair warning, I've never been properly courted before. You might have to teach me how it works. We'll figure it out together, same as we've figured out everything else." They spent the rest of the morning working on the garden, digging up the damaged plants and salvaging what they could. It was good work, honest work, and as they labored side by side in the warming sun, Caleb felt something settle in his chest. Contentment, peace, the sense that he was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do, with exactly the person he was meant to be with. Around noon, another rider appeared. This time it was Deputy Hayes, looking excited and a little nervous. "Sheriff sent me to update you," he called as he approached. "Joseph Harlan's in custody. He tried to run when we came for him, but we got him. He's facing charges for fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, and criminal assault from the mob incident. Pemberton's already trying to negotiate, but the evidence is solid. Sheriff says Joseph's looking at 5 to 10 years minimum." "And the land?" Caleb asked. "Deed's been registered properly in Mrs. Dalton's name, transferred legally to you through the original sale. It's clean and clear. Joseph's got no claim to it whatsoever." "What about the mining company interest?" Iris asked. Hayes grinned. "Funny thing about that. Sheriff sent a telegram to Denver, to Continental Resources. Turns out they did preliminary surveys on land in this area, but they found the mineral deposits were too small to be commercially viable. There's silver there, but not enough to mine profitably. Whole thing was a bust." Caleb started laughing. He couldn't help it. All of Joseph's scheming, all his plotting and planning and destroying lives. And it was for nothing. For a few veins of silver that weren't even worth extracting. He destroyed his family, his reputation, and his freedom for worthless land, Iris said, shaking her head. "There's a kind of justice in that." "Poetic justice," Caleb agreed. "The kind you can't write better than life delivers it." After Hayes left, they returned to the garden. By evening, they'd replanted most of it, and though the new seedlings looked small and fragile, they had strong roots. They'd grow. They'd flourish. They'd become something beautiful. As the sun set that night, Caleb and Iris sat on the porch together, watching the sky turn gold and orange and purple. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Everything that needed saying had been said. Everything that needed doing had been done. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. Joseph's trial was swift and decisive. Marcus and Emma testified, their statements corroborated by Peterson and others who came forward once they knew it was safe. Joseph was sentenced to 7 years in territorial prison for fraud and conspiracy, with additional charges pending regarding Thomas's death. Marcus and Emma left town shortly after, moving to Emma's family property in Colorado. Before they left, Emma came to visit Iris one last time. "I wanted to thank you," Emma said as they stood in the newly flourishing garden, "for showing me that it's possible to survive, to escape, to build something new." "You saved my life when you warned the sheriff," Iris reminded her. "We're even. We're friends," Emma corrected. "And if you ever need anything, you write to me. Promise?" "I promise." 6 weeks after Joseph's arrest, on a warm Saturday afternoon in late summer, Caleb and Iris were married in the small church in town. It was a simple ceremony. Sheriff Brennan stood as witness, along with Emma and Marcus, who'd traveled back for the occasion, and a handful of neighbors who'd come to know and respect Iris over the past months. Iris wore a dress she'd made herself, simple blue cotton that brought out the green in her eyes. Caleb wore his best suit, brushed clean and pressed. They spoke their vows quietly, firmly, looking at each other with the kind of certainty that comes from having been tested and emerged stronger. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Caleb kissed his bride in front of witnesses and law, Iris felt something she'd never experienced before. Complete, unfettered freedom. The freedom to choose her own life. The freedom to love and be loved without fear. The freedom to plant gardens and watch them grow, knowing she'd be there to harvest them. That evening, at the small celebration dinner held in the church hall, Sheriff Brennan raised his glass in a toast. "To Caleb and Iris Monroe," he said. "Two people who turned a bad bargain into something beautiful, who faced down corruption and violence with truth and courage, who proved that sometimes the things that look like punishment are actually blessings in disguise. May your marriage be blessed with the same strength and determination you showed in fighting for it." "Hear, hear," the gathered friends echoed. Caleb looked at his wife. His wife, and marveled at the journey that had brought them here. She'd arrived as unwanted cargo, a burden he'd accepted reluctantly for the sake of land. She'd become the treasure he'd been searching for without knowing it, the partner who matched his strength with her own, the woman who'd transformed his house into a home and his solitary existence into a shared life. "What are you thinking?" Iris asked, reading the expression on his face. "I'm thinking that the Harlans meant to punish us both. They meant to saddle me with an inconvenient widow and exile you to the middle of nowhere. They thought they were being clever. And instead they gave us each other. They gave us a chance we never would have had otherwise. They tried to destroy you, and instead they set you free. They tried to trap me, and instead they gave me everything I didn't know I needed." Iris smiled and leaned against his shoulder. "Their punishment became our treasure. Best treasure I ever found." They stayed at the celebration until late, then rode home together under a sky full of stars. The ranch waited for them, solid and real, with a garden full of growing things and a future full of possibilities. In the months and years that followed, they built that future one day at a time. The garden flourished, producing more vegetables than they could use, enough to share with neighbors and sell in town. The herd grew. The house expanded. First a new room, then a whole addition, preparing for a family they both hoped for. Iris never forgot where she'd come from, the darkness she'd survived. But she didn't let it define her. She became known in town as a woman of strength and kindness, someone who'd help anyone in need, especially women trapped in situations like she'd been. More than one frightened wife found refuge in the Monroe home, found courage in Iris's story, found hope in her example. Caleb watched his wife bloom like her garden, watched her grow into the fullness of who she was meant to be, and counted himself blessed beyond measure. He'd thought he wanted land, security, the simple satisfaction of building something from nothing. Instead, he'd found love, partnership, a reason to build that went beyond mere survival. On their first anniversary, they stood together in the garden that had become Iris's pride and joy. Tomatoes hung heavy on the vine, beans climbed their poles. Flowers bloomed in riotous color along the borders. It was abundance. It was life. It was proof that beauty could grow from even the most barren soil. "Do you remember what you asked me?" Iris said, running her hand over the plants. "That first night after the storm, when the garden was destroyed? I asked you to tell me the truth about Thomas's death. No, after that, you asked me to keep the garden if things went wrong, if they took me away. You promised you would." Caleb pulled her close. "I remember. You kept that promise, even when you didn't have to, even when I was just a stranger thrust into your life. You saw something worth protecting, worth preserving." "I saw you," Caleb said simply. "I saw someone who'd been beaten down and discarded but who still had enough hope to plant seeds in the ground. How could I not protect that?" Iris turned in his arms and kissed him, long and sweet, tasting of summer and possibility. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "The family sent me to you as punishment," she said. "A burden, an inconvenience, a problem to be solved. And instead I found a home, a partner, a life worth living. They tried to curse us both, and instead they blessed us." Caleb looked at the garden, at the house, at the woman in his arms who'd transformed everything. The Harlans had meant to destroy them. They'd meant to use Iris and manipulate Caleb and profit from their schemes. But schemes built on lies always crumbled eventually. Truth had a way of emerging, of setting things right. "Their punishment became our treasure," he said, echoing her words from their wedding night. "The greatest treasure," Iris agreed, "the one we didn't know we were looking for." As the sun set over their land, over the garden and the house, and the life they'd built together, Caleb Monroe held his wife and counted his blessings. He'd bargained for 20 acres. He'd gotten so much more. He'd gotten everything. And in the years to come, when neighbors asked how they'd met, how they'd come together, Caleb and Iris would smile and tell the story. About a widow sent away in disgrace, about a rancher who needed land, about a bargain that became something far more precious than either of them could have imagined. They'd tell it as a love story, because that's what it was, the best kind. The kind earned through fire and fear and fighting for what was right. The kind that started with darkness and ended with light. The kind where punishment transformed into blessing, where exile became home, where the thing meant to destroy them became the foundation of everything beautiful. The family had sent the widowed woman as punishment, but she had been the treasure all along. The treasure Caleb had dreamed of without knowing it. The treasure that made everything else worth having. And together, they lived out their days in peace and plenty, tending their garden, raising their family, building their future one honest, loving, hard-won day at a time. The Harlans had tried to write their ending, but Caleb and Iris wrote their own instead. And it was better than any bargain could have promised. It was real. It was earned. It was theirs. It was everything.